Chapter 216. Normally, when a normal person saw such a sudden scene, their first thought would be panic. But this group of demons was very different. Seeing Li Yunxin's appearance, they were first stunned. Logically speaking, these demons used to be scale worms, so they could not see any beauty or ugliness in people. But after gaining intelligence and understanding, they had to change according to a person's appearance. Their nature had gradually been erased and changed over decades, centuries, and even millennia. Thus, when these stupid demons saw Li Yunxin, their first thought was, "What a beautiful person. How is that a hairy face and thunder mouth?" It was the great demon, the 10th young master, who could not see, heard Li Yunxin say this and immediately knew something was wrong. Twisting his body, he burrowed behind the demon and said, "Take him down, take him down." At this time, the demons finally came to their senses. They immediately flashed their weapons and swarmed toward Li Yunxin. The weapons in the hands of the demon kings and demon generals were of different lengths and shapes. There were rusty anchors taken from sunken ships that came crashing down toward Li Yunxin. There was a dung fork made of steel from somewhere that went straight for Li Yunxin's waist. There were even 2 or 3 Qing army standard spears and dagger axes, as well as 2 or 3 sabers and sabers. But they matched the nondescript attire and hideous appearance of the demons. Li Yunxin did not show mercy. With a wave of his hand, a bamboo fan appeared in his hand and he swept it toward the weapons. He was a great demon of the true realm, and the fan in his hand was where his dragon palace was located. It was also a treasure scroll. How could it be an ordinary item? With this sweep, those weapons were instantly swept into a mess, and they were all broken in a messy manner. The demon felt a huge force coming from his hand and immediately knew something was wrong. He turned around to escape. But firstly, Li Yunxin hated people who plotted against him behind his back. Secondly, he wanted to take the opportunity to kill people to establish his dominance. Thirdly, he had indeed suppressed his violent nature for many days. His figure flashed and he chased after them, faster than a galloping horse or a shooting star. Using only the tip of his folding fan, he exploded the heads of those demons one by one. This round of killing was so intense that the entire lake had turned into a pool of red soup. On the other hand, the small shrimps and fish in the muddy water were satisfied with the flying brains, minced meat, and rotten bones. Li Yunxin casually dealt with these small fries, took a deep breath, and chased after the 10th young master. While he was on the top of the fissure, the water had been muddied by him. At this moment, he no longer cared about the cold and rotten smell of the water in the crevice. Although it was still a blur when he looked down, his good eyes could still see the faint electric sparks that were emitted from the 10th young master's body as she fled. After chasing like this for a quarter of an hour, he realized that the crevice was actually deeper and wider than it looked. The deeper he went, the wider it became. It was a completely different world. He casually killed all the demons under the command of the 10th young master. How could the 10th young master not know? Seeing that she couldn't get rid of the killer behind her even with the terrain advantage, she knew that she was no match for the killer. She was scared and annoyed, so she ran away and said, "I have no enmity with you in the past. Why did you come to my house? I'm not an honest person who can be provoked. I'm a flood dragon in Dongting who has achieved the Tao. If you push me too hard, I will show my real body and fight with you. Both of us will be buried at the bottom of this lake." Her voice came out of the water, but it was different from that on land. It rumbled vaguely and there were echoes in the gaps between them. But the 10th young master's voice was so loud that Li Yunxin could hear it clearly. He followed her unhurriedly. At the same time, he took out a talisman from his folding fan and lit it up to observe the surroundings. Don't panic," he replied. "I just want to have a calm talk with you to become friends." Why is the 10th young master so panicked? The 10th young master didn't dare to believe his nonsense. His tone was leisurely without any sincerity. "To talk to me calmly." The 10th young master was even more panicked. She knew that her summer palace was deeper and there was no room for negotiation. So she made up her mind and said, "If you don't leave, I will use the 9th heaven thunder fire." Li Yunxin hurriedly said, "Oh, I heard that the 9th heaven thunder fire is the natural supernatural power of dragons. It specializes in killing in spirits. Do you really think you are a dragon?" Hearing his teasing, the 10th young master gritted her teeth and her body suddenly tensed up. He tensed up. The tiny electric arcs around her disappeared. They all went back into her body. However, after a breath of time, there was a sudden shout. the earth-shattering electric arcs weaved into a net, connecting the two walls of the deep water canyon and enveloping Li Yunxin. There were also fish and shrimps in the water. When the fish and shrimps touched the electric net, even fainting would be unnecessary. They directly turned into a puddle of ashes and stirred up the muddy water. When Li Yunxin saw this scene, she was really taken aback. The huge electric net was emitted from the 10th young master's body. She didn't use any Dharma treasure or Dharma spell. When the 10th young master struck out with the lightning, her real body was revealed. With the help of the electric light, Li Yunxin saw her real body. It was indeed the body of a thick dragon snake. A long dorsal fin that almost ran the length of the body flashed in the muddy water with the help of the electric light. It really looked like a dragon's body. At this moment, the electric net had already engulfed them. But Li Yunxin, he didn't dodge or dodge. When he saw the 10th young master's supernatural power and the appearance of the 10th young master, he had already guessed it. So he laughed and said, "Good, good, good. Grandpa will show you what the real 9th heaven thunderfire is." He didn't dodge or dodge. He just snorted coldly and showed his Dharma body of the god fiend. Then he widened his eyes and shouted, "Thunder, come." Nothing happened in the water, but in the sky above the water, a huge dark cloud immediately gathered. Once the dark cloud formed, there was a loud crackling sound. A thick bolt of lightning directly blasted into the Dongting. The lightning was so powerful that once it entered the water, the surrounding lake water was evaporated into water vapor. In the blink of an eye, it blasted into the gap where Li Yunxin was. When the 10th young master heard Li Yunxin's shout, he was shocked. Previously, someone told him that there was a big demon of the true state in the lake and he hoped to get rid of it. When he saw Li Yunxin just now, he suspected that it was the demon of the true state, so he turned around and left. Later, knowing that he couldn't escape, he wanted to use the identity of dragons to scare him away. Unexpectedly, he was really a dragon's. He didn't have time to complain in his heart. He was only thinking about how to resist and beg for mercy. However, how could an ordinary demon bear Li Yunxin's 9th heaven thunderfire? With a loud cracking sound, the smell of burnt meat immediately filled the gap. The 10th young master, who was at the peak of the transcendent state, didn't even have time to groan before his huge body was hit into a hard stick. He fainted straight away. He didn't know how long he fainted. When the 10th young master opened his eyes again, he was no longer in his lair, let alone in the watergrass forest. He was thrown on an island. It was called an island, but it was actually a reef protruding from the lake. The sun was shining high above his head and he was completely naked. He was so dry that smoke was about to come out. But in fact, he couldn't see anything even when he opened his eyes. He was blind. In the water, he could use the electric sparks all over his body to sense his surroundings. But on land, he really couldn't see anything. Just as he was about to run to the place with water vapor, he heard the voice of the killer. I guessed it, it really was him. The 10th young master had experienced his means, so he didn't dare to speak or move. He just lay on the big rock obediently, hoping that a cloud would come from the sky and cover the sun, so that his body would dry a little slower. Then he heard Li Yunxin say again, "You can discharge electricity. Your real body has such a long fin on its belly, it can be used to scare people. Unfortunately, I've seen it before. Not only have I seen it before, I've even had intimate contact with it." Li Yunxin paused, then laughed mockingly. "So, you're actually an electric eel pretending to be Dragon's son to trick people, right?" The 10th young master's true body was seen through, and he knew that he couldn't escape, so he didn't bother to think anymore. He just said sadly, "What's the name of an electric eel? My real body is a white eel. Today I've fallen into your hands and you're a great demon of the true state, a natural-born mythological beast of Dragon's son. Kill me or torture me, do as you please." White eel. Li Yunxin frowned. But then he said, "Eels. Note 1. Well, it looks like you're an invasive species. But I don't care about that. Let me ask you first, what's your name? Let me ask you again, are the Su family members on land really your friends?" The 10th young master originally didn't know why Li Yunxin found her. But sometimes, demons didn't need any reason to fight with each other and fight for territory. Now that she saw that he didn't eat her up, she just thought that he wanted to drag her ashore and torture her. This was also a common method of demons. Similarly, there was no reason just because, I want to. She didn't want Dragon Son to ask her name first and then ask about the Su family. The 10th young master felt some hope in her heart. She hurriedly said, "Your Majesty, since I'm a demon under Lord Dongting after I transformed, I took his surname, Li, and my name is Xian. The Su family on land according to people can be considered friends. It's just that this lowly one isn't very familiar with them. I just often enjoy some of their offerings. As for the offerings, they aren't anything good. They're all pigs, cows and sheep. The meat is tight and hot when it enters my mouth. It's really unpleasant." Li Yunxin ignored his long-winded words. He sat on a rock and stared at the naked and comical 10th young master Li Shan, and said, "You're a blind person. How did you make friends with the people on land? What do they want you to do when they make friends with you?" Li Shan hurriedly said, "Your Majesty, please understand I didn't deliberately make friends with the people on land. My eyes are not bright and I never like to go ashore. I only like those muddy undercurrents. But one day a man of the Su family came to Dongting with a boat, left a lot of offerings and called my name asking me to come out and meet him. I was going to make some waves to overturn the boat and eat the people and the livestock. But that day was very boring, so I simply went to have a look. As a result, I heard from that man that he was told by Yama in a dream at night, saying that there was a white eel in Dongting who had achieved the Tao and was expected to turn into a dragon. If I can make friends with this eel, I will worship it every year and in the future my children will be protected. I also know that this man is talking nonsense. But he said that Yama told me in a dream. If it wasn't for Yama, how could he know that I was here? Thus I chatted with him skeptically for a while. As a result, that man also knew that there was an evil dragon in Dongting. At that time I didn't know about it." Hearing this, Li Yunxin frowned and interrupted him. "What's the name of the man of the Su family? Su Zhizhong? Or his father?" The eel monster Li Shan was stunned for a while before remembering the name of his good friend, Su Zhizhong, who died a few days ago. He hurriedly waved his hand and said, No. It has been many years. It has been more than 200 years. That man was Su Zhizhong's ancestor. He was originally a fisherman." Li Yunxin's eyes lit up. "Go on, tell me in detail. If I find out about anything I'll skin you alive." Li Shan shivered and hurriedly said, "Don't worry, my king. I will tell you slowly." After talking to him for a while, I also felt that this little man was interesting. A few years ago I happened to see a passenger ship passing by. The people on the ship were writing some poems and singing some songs on the deck at night, and some rouge and powder were poured down from the ship. It was very annoying, so I sank it and put it at the bottom of the lake. There were a few boxes of treasures on the ship, but they were of no use to me. After a while I got familiar with him, so I brought a box of treasures from the bottom of the lake to him. After that the man became rich. There were more and more children and grandchildren, and then there was Su Zhen. When he said this, Li Yunxin knew that the eel monster was telling the truth. Red Lady told him about Su Weng before. She said that his ancestor fished in Dongting and got a considerable amount of wealth. It was exactly the same as what Li Shan said. Li Shan continued, "What do you usually ask me to do? In fact, I didn't do anything. That man told me that there was an evil dragon in Dongting. He also told me that I could claim that the evil dragon was the 10th dragon son in the world. I used this name to gather all the monsters in Dongting and become the monster king of a place. Hey, my real body can use thunder and lightning, and I have a long fin on my belly. If I showed my real body in the muddy water, I really looked like dragons, so I did it. I don't mean to blaspheme the dragon god. I usually call myself Dragon Son in Dongting. How dare I talk nonsense outside Dongting?" The ancestor of the Su family was a fisherman, but he knew that there was an evil dragon in this lake. Li Yunxin said slowly, "Then his grandson now asked you to kill his father. Then, someone asked you to kill a big demon who entered Dongting. Is this also what the Su family asked you to do?" Li Shan could tell that Li Yunxin's tone was not good, so he panicked. He faltered. "Yes. Do you know Su Weng?" Li Yunxin asked the question he wanted to figure out the most today. "The old man that Su Zhizhong asked you to kill. You said that you were friends with Su Zhizhong, so you should know his father." Note 1. Eel. The eel in the eel rice we eat is called white eel in ancient times. The electric eel originated in South America and its vision deteriorated. It looks similar to eel, but it is very different. It is not even the same class. There was no electric eel in ancient China. So there was no ancient name, so it was named White Eel. Chapter 217. 10th Young Master Li Xian is stunned for a while and then says, "That's Su Weng. Isn't he dead?" Li Yunxin looks at him calmly, not knowing if he can feel his gaze. That old man is not dead. He is in Mount June. Earlier he hid in an island for a few days with a demon by his side. He said that the demon is his old servant, and its original body is a big centipede. I've tasted its meat, it's delicious. Li Yunxin walks to Li Xian's side, grabs his arm and lifts him up, hanging him in front of his eyes to look at him carefully. At this time he is still in the Dharmakaya of gods and demons like a small giant. Li Xian is in a human body like a child in front of him. Li Yunxin feels a slight itch on his arms and chest. He thinks that Li Xian is trying to find out his situation with electric light. He doesn't stop him, instead he hopes that Li Xian can see his eyes now. I believe that old man's words. He doesn't have to lie to me. But now I don't believe you. I'm Qi Wen, the 9th son of the dragon, a great demon in the real realm. Now I'm trapped in Dongting by an inhibition left by a divine dragon, the demon that someone told you to get rid of. Since I can't get out, I have to find some ways to get out. However, before I get out, this Dongting has already been my Daoist field. I don't care how you used to get along with the Lord Dongting. But now that you're here, you little scumbags. Li Yunxin glared at him fiercely and pushed him forward again. You have to tell me everything you know and worship me as if I were your ancestor. You have to pray to the celestial being every day and night. You'd better help me find a way to get rid of me as soon as possible. I've eaten eels, but I haven't eaten eels yet. If you dare to hesitate again, I will make you really a pile of shit in the stomach of the dragon son. After Li Yunxin finished speaking, she threw Li Xian to the ground and shouted, "Put on your clothes and tell Grandpa everything. If I'm not satisfied, I'll tear you apart on the spot." By now Li Xian really knew that he had bumped into the main character, and was so flustered that he didn't know what to do. If it was an ordinary battle between demons and monsters, he would probably be more courageous if he was captured, because he knew that demons were cruel by nature. If he begged, it would only make the other party excited and torture him even more. But now she sees a glimmer of hope. Dragon Son seems to really want to ask something important and wants to take charge of Dongting. Since that was the case, even a fake dragon son like him needed a few capable assistants, let alone a Shinryu. He thought about it carefully in his heart and finally stopped pretending to be a dead fish. Instead, he conjured a white robe and crawled to Li Yunxin's side. "Your Majesty, please don't be angry. Your Majesty, please don't be angry. This lowly one does know some things, but I feel that what I said was too outrageous. Outrageous. Yes. It's too inconceivable, so I didn't dare to say it. He really didn't mean to hide it. Since your Majesty wants to listen, say it." Li Xian shuddered again and opened his mouth to speak. "Your Majesty, you have to know that my eyesight is not good, so I don't often go to the land. Many things are reported by the little monsters under my seat, so I'm not very familiar with them. But I also know that the Daotong and Kenzo in the world are the righteous path of Xianmen cultivators. I also know that Daoists and swordsmen are not friendly to demons. If they encounter those with low cultivation, they will kill them immediately. That lowly one usually makes some waves in Dongting and swallows some people. Hey, it's also for us demons to vent our grievances. Therefore, the Su family found me to be friends with." "What's the name of the Su family?" Li Yunxin asked. "I can't remember it for more than 200 years. Coincidentally, the name of the Su family is easy to remember. His surname is Su and his first name is 3. He is called Zhou Xian. Isn't this an alias?" "Oh, it's not." Li Xian hurriedly said. "After Zhou Xian died, I continued to contact his descendants. Sometimes when I mentioned his ancestors, they all said that his real name was Zhou Xian. They continue to tell me in detail, don't make your own decisions. If you think it's useless, you have to tell me." The white eel monster Li Xian continued to speak. "Therefore, when the Su family found me to be friends with them, I was not willing. When he said that there was a flood dragon in Dongting and that I called myself the 10th dragon son, I became even more suspicious. You must know that even though we fiendish demons are a messy bunch, anyone who is connected to the orthodoxies or sword sects will be shunned at all costs. At that time I asked Zhou Xian, how can the things you said be known by a fisherman? Are you from Daotong? What are you planning?" Zhou Xian said that he did have some supernatural powers. But it wasn't the supernatural powers of Daotong and Kenzo. He was a fisherman, but he seemed to know everything about human cultivators. Back then I was already quite familiar with him. I told him that you were just making empty promises. Do you know that all the demons and devils in the world hope to obtain the techniques of the orthodoxies and sword sects so that they can take a shortcut to cultivation? Those human cultivators start cultivating when they are children. If they are talented, they can reach the transcendent state in a few decades. If they are ordinary, they can reach the transcendent state, the true state, and the profound state in a few hundred years. Even if the two sages in the world cultivate to such a high level, how long would it take? Only 1,000 years. But we demons transform into humans and have human acupoints and meridians, but it is much slower. I was a 700-year-old demon and I only reached the emptiness state at that time. Demons that have transformed into humans for thousands of years are not rare, but how many of them are like the two sages? Therefore, although I don't like Daotong and Kenzo, I can't look down on their divine heart technique. Therefore I argued with Zhou Xian. The Zhou Xian said some vague things and I ignored him. Finally, he got angry and said, "Since you don't believe me, I will teach you the divine heart technique. I will teach you the divine heart technique if you don't believe me." He recited a set of incantations on the spot. When he finished, he told me that to practice this technique I must first disperse my cultivation and then go through the tribulations like a human cultivator. At that time my cultivation was low and I was born with the ability to control lightning. I didn't have any enemies, so I decided to disperse my cultivation and cultivate again. Do you still remember that technique? Tell me. Li Yunxin let out a breath, feeling that he was about to touch something. His voice became low and calm and Li Shan noticed the change in his voice. As a result, he was even more careful in his recitation, and told her everything about the incantation he had learned. But when Li Yunxin heard and thought about it, he was slightly disappointed. He didn't know what the incantations of Daotong and Kenzo were, but he had seen the incantations of the painting sect in the translucent jade scroll, and understood a bit from his parents. What Li Shan said was the truth. What he obtained was indeed the divine heart technique. There was nothing strange about it. But this was the strangest part. The Zhou Xian from 200 years ago didn't seem to care much about the techniques of Daotong and Kenzo, and even seemed to look down on them. Moreover, he casually gave Li Shan the divine heart technique that all demons in the world yearned for even in their dreams. This made Li Yunxin think of another person. Qing Liangzhu. That Qing Liangzhu also had a lot of magical abilities, but his words were full of disdain towards Daotong and Kenzo. He said that he was a dual cultivator of both Daotong and Kenzo. There was nothing special about them, and he didn't go through the tribulations. Li Yunxin had fought with him before and knew that although his words were arrogant, he was speaking the truth. Qing Liangzhu was a member of the Freemasonry. Li Yunxin had felt that the things in Dongting Lake were full of evilness. It was the evilness of the Freemasonry. Then that Zhou Xian was also very likely to be a member of the Freemasonry. This strange organization had appeared and disappeared in the recent situation, like a venomous snake hibernating in the dark. Li Yunxin didn't know what their purpose was, but he had a guess in his mind. Therefore, when he was fighting with Yunzi, he planted a hidden mine. He told the son-in-law of the fourth branch of the Yu family in the city of Wei, the poor Wang Xing, the method of making gunpowder. Then Wang Xing was killed. His hidden mine was triggered. But this alone was still not enough to prove the idea in his heart. Now, he even found traces of the Freemasonry by the Dongting Lake. He took a deep breath and calmed himself down. Then he asked, "So, Zhou Xian made a fortune because of the box of treasures you gave him. Then, in the past 200 years he established a big family, and his tentacles extended in all directions. If I'm not wrong, you've done a lot of things for them in the past 200 years. Li Shan was stunned and hurriedly waved his hand. I didn't do anything for that person?" The demon instinctively felt that Li Yunxin had some opinions about the Zhou family, and it didn't seem to be a good one. So he hurriedly distanced himself from them. But Li Yunxin didn't care much about him. Instead he smiled. "Some people want you to do things for them, but you don't even know it yourself. For example, a few days ago he casually mentioned that the fat of a certain place aroused your interest. Then, a few days later he told you that a certain boat happened to be carrying people from that place. For example, you did something for him and thought you got benefits. He is a secular person and he has the heart to run his family business. He promised you great benefits first, and if he only wants a box of treasures in return, he is too narrow-minded. You are a demon and can be counted as his strong support. You can do a lot of dirty things for him. Think about it. How many people on the continent have you killed in the past 200 years? What kind of people? Did you really want to kill all of them? Li Shan listened to his words and was stunned for a long time. Then he said, speaking of which, it's really, although you are an idiot, you dared to use a demon as a knife and to deal with you for so long without being noticed, it is indeed a bit like the Freemasonry fishing in troubled waters. Li Yunxin smiled. That Zhou Xian is a powerful person. What happened after that? After that he died. Li Shan said carefully. 1 year when he went far away he encountered bandits and was killed. It was said that his corpse was not found. In the next 200 years, the Zhou family was not that interesting. I practiced the Heaven Heart technique and my level improved rapidly. I also gathered some demons under my command. It was also thanks to that Zhou Xian. Thanks to him. Li Yunxin laughed coldly. Maybe this is the result he wanted to see. Moreover, whether that person is really dead or faking his death, it's hard to say. Continue talking. Li Shan did not dare to refute him and only dared to listen obediently. After listening, he hurriedly continued. The king asked about that Zhou Weng, is an anomaly in the Zhou family. For generations, the Zhou family has been conscientious and diligent, managing their family business. But that Zhou Weng loves to play and does not have much contact with me. Logically speaking, this matter of mine is a secret passed down in the Zhou family. Every generation knows about it and they will come to make friends. But that Zhou Weng, I also do not like to pay attention to him. If not for some sacrifices, who would bother to talk to them? Zhou Xian's ability and temperament are not something that the rest of the people have learned. Speaking of which, other than playing, that Zhou Weng does not like women. Originally, this branch of the Zhou family would end with him, but at that time, there were still some old people in the family who were not dead. Anyway, he adopted a son and a daughter. They were already adults and there was no kinship between them. With this daughter, he does not care about the family business and all the important things in the family are taken care of by his children. That son is Zhu Zhizhang. Although Zhu Zhizhang is boring, he is very attentive. I think it is reasonable that he wants me to get rid of the old man of the Zhou family. After all, they are not blood relatives. Li Yunxin listened quietly and then pondered for a moment. Zhu Zhizhang told you that a big demon came to Dongting and wanted you to get rid of it? Li Shan hesitated for a while and then answered yes. He hurriedly added, it is also God's mercy. That annoying one also drowned, and now he is in my stomach. So, Li Yunxin thought for a while and then said slowly, does it mean 8 days ago Zhu Zhizhang told you about this? It was also 8 days ago that Zhou Weng came to this lake by boat. Now Dongting is blocked and many people of the Zhou family are dead. Now no one from the Zhou family is contacting you anymore. Li Shan hurriedly clapped his hands. Your Majesty, you are so smart. That's right, that's right. Li Yunxin knew that he had figured out the context. In his mind, things were roughly like this. Maybe there were many deviations and uncertainties, but the most self-consistent explanation he could infer at present. 200 years ago, a man who belonged to the Freemasonry, named Zhou Xian, came to Dongting. He was alone, but he had some intelligence and information. Then, relying on the intelligence and information, he made friends with Li Shan and got his first bucket of gold. Then, with his extraordinary courage and experience, he used Li Shan, the demon, to clear many obstacles for himself and ran the Zhou family. Li Yunxin thought that this should be a point of the Freemasonry's layout in the secular world. Taking root in the secular world, they could have a large amount of intelligence and resources. However, Daotong and Kenzo were superior and didn't take this kind of thing very seriously. Their roots and vines were the officials of various countries, and they didn't care much about the power of the people. And the Freemasonry filled this gap. Li Yunxin didn't know how much it filled, but he felt that it was not just in Dongting. It should be noted that a high-level cultivator of Daotong like Yun Zi, who was like an immortal in the eyes of secular people, was tied to the Freemasonry. Then the Zhou family had been working for the Freemasonry for 200 years, whether they knew it or not. Until Zhou Weng appeared. Li Yunxin still didn't know how Zhou Weng had such terrible magical power, and how he went to the Zhou family and became the patriarch. But it seemed that Zhou Weng tried to mess up all this. He wanted to destroy the Zhou family in an unobtrusive way. so he was forced to adopt a son and a daughter. It was said that he was too lazy to manage the family affairs. In fact, he was robbed of his power. But Li Yunxin didn't know how his magical power could be robbed by secular people. After that, it was all based on his own bold conjecture. Su Weng's evil intention was finally exposed, and Su Zhizhong decided to get rid of him. Because of this, he even had a demon by his side to ensure that everything was safe. But Su Weng knew this, so he beat him at his own game and took all the high-level members of the Su family on board. So today's situation came to this. All the high-level members of the Su family were dead, and Su Weng achieved his goal temporarily in a sense. The key point was that Su Weng knew that there would be a big disaster in Dongting that day. Li Yunxin didn't know how he knew. But in the end, besides these many things, Li Yunxin also realized another thing. Su Weng, who was omnipotent, seemed to come to Dongting to hide from something. If he also knew the existence of the inhibition of Dongting, it meant that in the eyes of such a powerful Su Weng, people outside could not break through the inhibition of Dongting and come in to threaten him. That was to say, it seemed that he really couldn't go out for the time being and couldn't rely on his own ability to break through this inhibition. Chapter 218. But at this time, Li Yunxin doesn't want to leave Dongting anymore. He was just worried about the powerful demons under his command. Now it seems that Su Weng did him a favor. Lu Laodao and Sanhua are safe for the time being. Sure, Queasy is a good person, but it's unrealistic for Li Yunxin to worry about her like how he worries about Lu Laodao. She can only pray for herself. As for the other 4 demons, since Su Weng can't find them, it's hard for him to find them. So he can rest assured. Or is it because even Master Su has to enter the inhibition to hide from something? What is he hiding from? He knows the world outside is not peaceful. People from Daotong came to the city of Wei and decided to wage war against demons. For this reason, they planned to seize the divine dragon's soul in Dongting to weaken Shinryu's power. But the inhibition of Dongting is hard to break, and they don't seem to know the condition of Shinryu's soul, so they must mobilize a large force. But if this soul, could it be that the true dragon had purposely stayed here because it had anticipated today's situation? He attracted a large number of cultivators from Daotong and Kenzo here, and then Lord Dongting left in a hurry. Was it because of this? Li Yunxin thinks for a while in silence. Although he knows it's his own wishful thinking, he is getting more and more frightened. Damn it. He can't help cursing. Originally, he stayed in Weishui River because he thought it was a good place to run. But who would have thought that there is still a part of Shinryu's soul hidden in this place? Now he has completely dragged himself into the eye of the storm. Li Shan's heart beats fast when he hears his unkind tone. He is afraid that Dragon Sun will tear him apart when he loses his temper. Li Yunxin is silent for a while and then says to him, "What is your position among the demons in Dongting Lake?" When Li Shan heard this, he immediately heaved a sigh of relief. He hurriedly got up and answered him properly, "Your Majesty, it's not that I'm boasting. In this Dongting there were only a few demons in the place of the outer fringe. As for this little one, after cultivating the heavenly will technique, my progress amongst the demons can be said to be at a tremendous pace. Due to the fact that he used to call himself the 10th Dragon Son, he had gathered many demon kings and demon generals. But just now, His Majesty." Li Yunxin smiled. "Those who can't even take one of my attacks are trash. It's not a pity if he dies." Li Shan lowered his head. He thought to himself, "What realm is this true realm great fiendish demon at? In your eyes, of course they are trash. However, those trash that were scattered all over the world could also become demon kings and demon generals that could gather a region." However, when he thought about how he had indeed taken a blow from Long Sun's 9 Heavens Thunderfire, it could be seen that in Li Yunxin's heart he was definitely not a piece of trash. He couldn't help but feel slightly proud of himself. He continued, "There are other demons scattered around the lake, and they have gathered some demon generals under their command. Usually they mind their own business, but they are certainly not in harmony. In the past, when the Lord Dongting issued an edict, they would rush forward. However, if it wasn't for the matter of the Grand Supreme Elder, they would not be convinced in private. Disputes are common and fights are not rare. Those children who have yet to transform or are about to transform are often captured and killed to establish their power. It is indeed difficult, but it is also the norm." When he finished, he thought that Li Yunxin would ask more details. Then he would show off again so that this long sun would know that although he hid in the canyon all day long, he was also aware of what happened in Dongting. However, how could Li Yunqi not know what he was thinking? He immediately said, "Then let's go. You bring me along and sweep through the nests one by one." As soon as he finished, he rolled up Li Shan and entered the water again. Li Shan was dumbfounded. He thought to himself that this dragon was truly savage. Why did he want to sweep over after only asking these questions? The Lord Dongting is also a big demon, but he usually only subdued people with his power. I don't see him killing people so happily. If he really took Li Yunxin to sweep over nest by nest, the demons in Dongting would not be able to do anything to the dragon son in the real world in the future, but they would hate him to the core. However, he didn't know what Li Yunxin was thinking. When he was trapped in Dongting before, he was only thinking about how to get out of trouble so that he wouldn't be caught like a turtle in a jar. Therefore, after listening to Hong Yangzi's method, he patrolled around Dongting again in order to find some ways to relieve the depression in his heart. Unfortunately, he met Su Weng on the isolated island in the lake. Originally, he was bored and wanted to find someone to relieve his boredom. However, he found that Su Weng was not an ordinary secular person, nor was he an ordinary cultivator or demon. Such a strange person appeared in Dongting where he lived at such a critical moment. Naturally, he was shocked and wanted to find out the details. However, after investigating, he found that the Freemasonry was involved. At this point, he realized that firstly, the inhibition of Dongting could not be broken so easily. Secondly, what happened in the city of Wei and the Weishui River near Dongting. He didn't know which was a coincidence and which was arranged. The whereabouts of the Freemasonry were erratic and they seemed to have a big plan. They also developed and fostered forces in the secular world, demons and Daotong Kenzo. Now Dongting became the focus of the world. Was it because of the Freemasonry? After all, he was forced to escape from the mountain village and his parents died suddenly because of Qing Liangzi of the Freemasonry. Let's talk about the soul of Shinryu in Dongting. He first met the 9th young master and then met the Lord Dongting. Finally, a series of things happened which made the cultivators of Daotong and Kenzo gather in the city of Wei to get that part of the soul. He didn't know whether it was the plot of the demons or the joint plot of the three parties. Therefore, he realized that the world outside the inhibition of Dongting seemed to be more dangerous than inside Dongting. In the eyes of others, he was a sinister, vicious, paranoid, and arrogant lunatic. But in his heart, he would like to believe that he had fallen into a trap. However, this situation did not belong to a single party. Daotong Kenzo demons and the Freemasonry, they all wanted to do something. However, with him, a ruthless character who liked to turn everything upside down, the trap was out of control. It should not be expected by any party now. Now he was in the relatively safe Dongting Lake. One thing he could do was to clean up the demons in the lake. The Lord Dongting was a powerful monster in the Xian realm, and he had been in Dongting for 3,000 years. He could convince people with his power. But when it came to him, there was only one effective way. If he couldn't get away in a short time, he would turn all the monsters in Dongting into screws. The good days when the Lord Dongting ruled Dongting had passed. And now, he wanted to be their ancestor. Chapter 219. Before learning that the lair of the 10th young master Li Shan was destroyed, the Ao king was planning to gather his subordinates to find the flood dragon. However, he doesn't remember the word flood dragon. It is called an evil worm. Not everyone knows that the Lord Dongting left Dongting, but the Ao king is one of the few demons who know the news. This means that he is not a random little bastard. According to his name, he is a monster king. When the Lord Dongting is still here, the evil worm has no chance to cause trouble. Once it appears, it will be killed immediately and will not harm the surrounding water tribes. But now the Lord Dongting is gone, and Li Yunxin is not in a hurry to kill the flood dragon. Therefore, the huge evil flood dragon turns the Dongting upside down today. However, it doesn't dare to go to Mount June. It is scared by Su Weng. The Ao king's real body is a crab. In this Dongting he has been cultivating for the longest time except for the Lord Dongting. 1,500 years ago his spiritual wisdom was awakened. 1,000 years ago his real body grew to the size of a hill. One day he saw the Lord Dongting patrolling Dongting with shrimp soldiers and crab generals. An idea came to his mind and he transformed into a human form. Now that the Lord Dongting is gone, the Ao king hibernates quietly for a few days to observe the situation. Gradually he finds that no one seems to come out to lead the overall situation. Although Hong Nyangzi is the daughter of the Lord Dongting, all the monsters in the lake know that she is not a decisive evil woman. Instead, she is a person who yearns for love in the world. This kind of person can't take on a big responsibility. The Ao king thinks about it and finally thinks that he is the one who can turn the tide at this moment. Dongting is inexplicably sealed. This is a disaster that has never happened in thousands of years. The monsters and the water tribes in the lake are anxious. If they don't do something now, when will they? What's more, a few days ago, a big demon flew over his territory. It seemed that the demon's realm was quite high. Without the Su family telling him that it is the Wei River Dragon King Li Yunxin, the Ao king is not afraid. He is a big demon at the peak of the transcendent state. Because of his talent, his body is much stronger than ordinary demons. Therefore he felt that, just like the Lord Dongting 1,000 years ago, it is time for him to patrol the 6 valleys and 13 streams of Dongting with his troops and generals. That's why I'm going to settle the score with that evil bug. That evil bug was really hateful. In the past few days, it had already overturned many cave dwellings and eaten many demons. The Ao king had seen it once from afar and thought it should be a demon of the true state. Although they were in the true realm, they did not have the intelligence of ordinary demons. They were considered livestock among the demons. Since that was the case, there would always be a way to hurt him if they gathered more people. It didn't matter if they could kill it or not. What was important was that as long as the worm didn't die, other demon kings would die. Either way, it was a good outcome. Then a demon general rushed into the cave and reported to him that the lair of the 10th young master in the Shipwreck Valley in the west had been destroyed. The Ao king laughed out loud when he heard the news. He then asked the demon general to tell him everything in detail. He and the 10th young master had been enemies for a long time. He was the demon king for 1,000 years, and he had seen the Lord Dongting's heroic patrolling. He had also listened to the Lord Dongting's teachings 3 times before, so he thought that his status would always be higher than the others. But that 10th young master, although he didn't know what her true form was, she called herself Dragon's Son. Just this point alone was enough to make him dislike it. Plus, she had hundreds of years of cultivation and now her level was the same as his. She was also trying to get close to the other demon kings. She seemed to be very restless. When the Ao king thought of these things, he wanted to get rid of her. But he had 1,500 years of life left. He wouldn't recklessly fight with a demon who was also at the peak of the transcendent state. Thus, when he heard this news now, it was simply like he'd jumped into an icy cold well on a hot summer day, and his heart was carefree to the extreme. He grabbed a piece of sticky meat from a large golden plate beside him and threw it to the crab monster in front of him. He said, tell me everything." The crab monster hurriedly gobbled it up. Seeing his king laughing, he also became happy. He said, "Hee hee, my king, I heard that there was a true state demon in this lake. He was 100 feet tall, his eyes were like copper bells, and he spat fire from his mouth. He killed his way to the 10th young master's Shipwreck Valley. He opened his mouth and swallowed all the demon kings and demon generals. He only kept the 10th young master alive and brought her ashore. I think he is going to dry her and eat her." At this point, the crab monster held his belly and laughed. The Ao king was currently in his own palace. It looked like the palace of a human emperor, but his cultivation was not deep. The area was small, about the size of a courtyard, and the surroundings were filled with fog. Therefore, from who knows where, he procured gold cups and lamps, tables and chairs made of cedar wood, blankets soaked with mud, and all sorts of nondescript paintings and calligraphy, and hung them on the walls for decoration. There were a few small demons in the palace. When they heard the crab spirit's words, they saw the Ao king and the demon general laughing, so they laughed as well. But after laughing for a while, the Ao king suddenly stopped. He frowned and thought. After thinking for a while, he suddenly realized something. He grabbed the golden plate beside him and threw it at the crab monster and the demon general's face. He scolded, "You idiot, you think this is a good thing? Who knows if he will come and destroy our Immortal's cave after destroying Li Shan's." The crab monster and the other demons were not as quick-witted as his king. With a smile on his face, he thought for a while. He could not understand what destroying Li Shan's cave and destroying his own cave had to do with destroying his own cave. But when the Ao king is angry, there must be something to be angry about. The Ao king's words must be unfathomable. His joy immediately turned into anger. He gritted his teeth and shouted loudly, saying that he wanted to skin the big demon and pull out the big demon's tendons. The Ao king sighed in exasperation. He stared with his big bulging eyes and thought for a while. Finally he came up with a wonderful idea. He laughed 3 times and ordered the demon general, "Quickly go and inform the demon kings of the 4 valleys and 13 streams. Tell them that a killer has come and wants to wipe out all of our caves. Tell them to come to the Valley of Storm immediately to discuss the plan and elect me as the Lord of Dongting." Isn't that perfect? The demon general listened to his words and thought for a while. He was thinking about what was so wonderful about this plan. But how could his hard-shelled brain think clearly? She could only remember a few sentences that the Ao king had said. She stood there in a daze for a while. The Ao king was angry again when he saw his stupid look. He kicked him to the ground and rolled a few times. He said, "You idiot, go and come back quickly." The demon general could only shout, "My king is wise. This is a wonderful plan," and ran out of the cave. The crab demon general sent by the Ao king had some innate abilities, so he was able to travel at a very fast speed. It only took him 2 days and 2 nights before he came back. But when the Ao king saw the demon general again, he realized that his 2 thick arms were gone. There was only a bare torso and a head on top of his head. He looked like he was about to cry. The demon general said that he went to Xian Valley first. But the Snake King listened to him and said that he didn't care about the big demons and whether they were attacking his house or not. The crab monster general had a flash of inspiration. He said that they haven't attacked yet. Once they destroyed Ao King's Valley of Storm, wouldn't they go straight to Xian Valley? In the end, the Snake King got impatient and said that he was too long-winded and didn't know what to say. He wanted to eat him with wine. The demon general said that he was the messenger of the Ao King. Once he ate him, the Ao king would be furious and would attack his house. When the Snake King heard the demon general's words, she felt that it made sense. But she still said that she was greedy. The demon general had to break one of his claws and let her eat it before he left. After they left, they continued to the next house and arrived at the cauldron-casting valley. The master of this valley was a 1,000-year-old tortoise. He was usually slow and was the enemy of the Snake King of Xian Valley. When he saw the demon general, he didn't ask about anything else and only asked him where his arm went. The demon general thought that since this tortoise was the enemy of the Snake King, he could ask him to cause some trouble. The crab monster only had this kind of wisdom once every 10 years. He quickly told the tortoise about it. Who knew that the tortoise would stare at him and say, "You gave a claw to the Snake King. If I don't eat it when it's my turn, won't I lose face?" So he broke his other claw and ate it. The pitiful demon general dragged his body to the other 2 valleys but was rejected at the door. The other 2 demon kings only sent people out to say that if they flatten Feng Bo Valley, Xian Valley and Cauldron Casting Valley, wouldn't they be able to call themselves ancestors? They wouldn't care about your family's matters. He could only go to the last valley, Xianxia Valley. The one that occupied Xianxia Valley was the 1,000-year-old red flame vermilion toad spirit. It lived at the bottom of the winding Xianxia Valley. At this time, the demon general went over and saw the Toad King eating and drinking on the water, using the temperature of the sun and moon to nourish his sea of qi and prolong his life. If the tortoise was said to be slow, then the Toad King was even slower. After meeting the demon general and listening to him talk about many things, he said that the Toad King had seen many storms and was fortunate enough to chat and laugh with the Ao King. Since the Ao King had such a plan, and he was also an old demon that had lived for more than 1,200 years, they would naturally help each other if there was a chance. The demon general's eyes were brimming with tears. He knew that this 1,000-year-old elder had great wisdom. He didn't dare to go to the 13 ravines again. The valley masters of the 4 valleys were demons with extremely high cultivation levels. They had taken human form for a long time and their temperaments were considered kind. However, he had lost 2 arms after a trip to the friendly great fiendish demons. If he were to head to an uncivilized land like the 13 ravines, he would definitely lose his life. Thus he hurried back and reported to the Ao King. When the Ao King heard this, he was furious. On the spot, he tore the golden plate in his hand into 2. He said that he would gather his troops and attack Immortal Valley first, then cast Tripod Valley. Then he would meet up with the Toad King and destroy the 13 ravines. The two of them would then divide the Dongting equally. He also forgot about the matter of dealing with the big demons of the true state. However, before the troops were all gathered, someone came to report that the Snake King was asking for an audience. The Ao King was stunned. He first asked the small demon who came to report what was going on. The small demon said proudly that the evil bug went to Immortal Valley. The Snake King fought with the bug for 3 rounds before fleeing and running to the Storm Valley to ask for help. The Ao King was immediately overjoyed. He raised the 2 golden melon hammers in his hands and shouted, "Hey, what a good demon girl, refusing a toast only to drink a forfeit. I will go and get your left claw back." Chapter 220. The Ao King was escorted by a group of demon generals all the way from the bottom of the dark valley to the bottom of the lake. When he got out of the mountain passes on both sides of the valley, he saw a naked, bright red demon woman swimming anxiously in the water. This demon woman was naked, but there were many steel-like scales on her body. The color of each scale was bright red, and it glowed dimly in the dark bottom of the water. As soon as the Ao King saw her, he shouted, "You Red Snake King! You asked my vanguard to report the news and you ate his pincer. Why did you come to my Storm Valley? Are you here to bully us?" Although the Red Snake King had the body of a human, she was now in the body of a demon and did not look good. Her face was ferocious and had some bone spurs. The red glow on her body made her look scary and strange. She showed a scary smile and said, "What are you talking about, Ao King? Your demon general broke his pincer and was reborn in a few days. It is not a big deal. But my Xianxia Valley." She was not afraid that the Ao King would hit her with the golden melon hammer. She swam closer with a scary smile. "But something big happened to my Xianxia Valley and Cauldron Casting Valley. I don't know how that evil worm swam over, but the big fish ignored it and only ate the small demons. First it destroyed the old bastard's cave, then it came to mine. Now it seems like it is coming to your Storm Valley." I thought about it. What the Ao King said makes sense. We should work together to subdue that evil worm. The Ao King heard her words and snorted, "If you knew this would happen, why did you do it in the first place?" The Snake King showed a strange smile. "I know you are worried about the Water Tribe in Dongting, so you want to work together. But the Ao King has forgotten one thing. Who is the wife of that old bastard's daughter?" The resourceful Ao King listened to her words and was stunned for a while, trying to figure out the deeper meaning in her words. But no matter how he thought about it, he could not figure it out. He restrained his expression and stopped talking. He pretended to understand and said, "Oh, so what?" The Serpent King's eyes widened and he pretended to be surprised. "Ao King, think about it. The 6 demon kings in the valley all know that this evil insect is going to be killed and sent to the golden-winged Rock King to eat. Every year, who comes to get the meat of this big worm? It was Bai Yunxin, the adopted daughter of King Rock. Do you still remember? 100 years ago, Bai Yunxin came to the lakeside to run some errands. The old tortoise's daughter happened to be out to play and was seen by Bai Yunxin. Bai Yunxin said that she thought she was cute, so she pecked her and took her away to be her maid. She really doted on her for the past 100 years. Why didn't I want to get involved in this before?" The snake demon stared at Ao Wang with a pair of bright yellow eyes. She leaned closer and whispered into his ear, "Because even if the 5 of us kill the evil worm with all our might, when Bai Yunxin comes to get the meat, the old bastard's daughter will put in a good word for her, which will be worth 1,000,000 words from us. All the credit will go to her. Ao King, think about it, am I right?" Ao Wang finally understood what the Snake King wanted to say. But he still kept a straight face. This, how could I not think of it, The Snake King didn't care about his reaction. She only continued to whisper in his ear, "Previously I didn't want to work for him for free. But now that the evil worm even destroyed my Xianxia Valley, how can I, the Red Snake King, swallow this anger? Coincidentally, the old tortoise has nowhere to go, so he can't swallow this anger. At this time this matter can be done. If you ask me, we can lead the evil worm to that Li Shan. Didn't they say that he has a big backer and wants to find trouble with us? Let's set up a trap, set up an ambush and lead the evil worm, Li Shan and his backer to fight together. It would be best if that person killed the evil Jiao. Let the old tortoise tell his daughter that the person killed the evil Jiao, and the meat of the jiao was rotten. How could he explain it to his daughter? Then Bai Yunxin would go crazy when she heard this. She is a true state demon. Maybe she can find a way to run into this prohibition spell and teach that person a lesson. What if that person can't kill the evil worm? We can also ask the old tortoise to tell his daughter that that person wants to snatch food from the Ping King's mouth, and covet the evil worm's flesh, bones and fur. If that Bai Yunxin is angry, she must teach that person a lesson. Ao King, do you think this is a good plan? After listening to the Snake King's plan, Ao Wang praised her to the heavens in his heart. However, his expression didn't change and he only nodded slightly. Well, this needs a long-term plan. Hehe. Follow me. The two monster kings talked for a while and the monster soldiers around Ao Wang were all confused. The monster general who lost his pincers wanted his king to avenge him, but he followed them back to the cave residence in a daze. He didn't know what happened at all and he just became friends. At this moment, Li Yunxin and Li Shan were also in Dongting, which was hundreds of meters deep. They were listening to a half-human, half-fish monster talking about the 5 Valley Masters' movements. The monster didn't speak very clearly, but Li Yunxin understood everything he wanted to know from a few words. When the monster finished, Li Shan hurriedly smiled and approached him saying, "You see, I sent spies to the 4 Monster Kings' cave residences. They didn't think of this. In the whole Dongting, the only one who isn't stupid is the Toad King. But the Toad King doesn't like to stir up trouble, so I didn't pay much attention to him." As the saying goes, know yourself and know your enemy and you will never be defeated. Li Yunxin didn't really care about what he was saying. He was rambling on and on trying to claim credit. The monsters in Dongting were so vulnerable, so he didn't need to spend any effort. Today he stopped in the water to listen to their laughable tricks because of one thing. The little servant girl by Yunxin's side was actually the daughter of the old tortoise in the Cast Cauldron Valley. When he first saw the young maidservant, he felt that she was pretty and had a lively and playful personality. She was a cute little girl when she didn't show her cruel side. He didn't want to know her background here. But he was not curious about the little maid but about Bai Yunxin. He didn't know how deep the relationship between Bai Yunxin and Dongting was, just like he didn't know that Bai Yunxin was related to the Ghost King in the city of Wei. But these were not what he cared about the most. The reason why he thought about these was that he really wanted to think about things but he couldn't. For example, what was the situation outside the inhibition of Dongting? Did cultivators really gather in the city of Wei to fight against the demons? What were the demons thinking? Black Bai Yanjun hadn't come to him for a long time. He also felt it was unusual. Since the 5 monster kings in the lake wanted to make trouble, he would let them make trouble first to lure the evil dragon out. He wanted to kill them violently, but now he realized it was better to follow the ideas of those monster kings. He wanted to figure out the situation in Dongting as soon as possible and then concentrate on thinking about the things outside the lake, his own situation and Master Su. Let's wait and see. Li Yunxin sighed in the water. At this moment, in the capital of the kingdom of Qing 2,000 miles away, someone said the same thing. The person who spoke was behind a light yellow gauze curtain, on a gorgeous gilded bed. She waved her hand while talking. Her fingers were white and slender and each nail was like white jade. The silver-armored warrior standing in front of her tent hurriedly stepped back and lowered his head. He heard the rustling sound of the woman's clothes behind the gauze curtain. She was probably lying down on the ice pillow. The gauze curtain and the big bed under the curtain were not in the room or even in the pavilion. Instead, they were on a green meadow. The meadow was wide and there were shadows of woods in the distance. It was as big as a hunting ground. To the east of the woods was Huilong Avenue, a straight road running from north to south of the capital, leading to the Yongding Gate. Behind the Yongding Gate was the Jade Stairs Square. Behind the Jade Stairs Square was the Jinghua Gate. Behind the Jinghua Gate was the residence of the emperor. This meant that the meadow where the woman was behind the gauze curtain was in the downtown of the Kingdom of Qing, the capital of the Kingdom of Qing. It was an honor that the silver-armored warrior could not imagine. Then the warrior heard the woman behind the gauze curtain say something else. "Ask the emperor to come in the afternoon. I have something to ask him." Chapter 221. In the Qing Kingdom, probably only the current Empress Dowager could use such a tone to say such things. However, the silver-armored warrior knew that the Empress Dowager was currently residing within the palace walls. not the woman in front of him. There should be very few people who know of the existence of this woman in front of him. He thought like this and responded in a low but clear voice. He bowed, then turned around and left. The warrior had walked a dozen or so steps when he heard the jingle of pendants behind the gauze curtain. He knew that the woman in the tent had gotten up. He wanted to turn his head and look at her, but he could not help thinking about her. His Majesty called her the Lady of Xianxia. Bystanders thought that the meadow next to Huilong Avenue was the Son of Heaven's land, and they also thought that the Taoist nun living in this meadow was the Son of Heaven's mistress. But the truth was far from the truth. There were no more than 5 people in the entire kingdom of Qing who knew the inside story, and the silver-armored warrior was one of them. The origin of Taoist priest Xianxia was unknown, and it was also unknown when she had such a relationship with the emperor. After all, the warrior was only 16 years old, and before he could access this secret, the secret seemed to have been going on for many years. What he knew now was that this nun seemed to be the true controller of the Qing kingdom. There was a rumor in the world that the world actually belonged to the Zhou family. He believed that the officials of the Zhou clan, led by the heavenly official of the Ministry of Appointments, Zhou Xian, and the large number of subordinates formed a group of civil officials who divided up the emperor's power and held the real power of the Qing kingdom. This was also what the silver-armored warrior had thought and worried about when he was young. However, after he learned of the secret of this grassland, he realized that he had indeed been overthinking things. The power of the Qing kingdom was not in the hands of the Zhou family or the emperor, and in the hands of Daoist Xianxia. At his age, where he longed to make a name for himself, he naturally had other ideas. For example, he believed that it was a terrible and shameful thing for the monarch's power to be controlled by a woman of unknown origin, so he suggested to the emperor that she be killed and no longer be a puppet. But the emperor's reaction was unexpected. Not only did he refuse to do so, but he also severely reprimanded the warrior, warning him not to have such thoughts again. The warrior once thought that the emperor had something difficult to say and was testing his loyalty. But after several remonstrations, he realized that things were even more unbelievable than he had imagined. That was exactly what the emperor thought. He respected and revered that woman, and was willing to offer his monarchical power. How terrifying! Probably because of this thought, the young warrior finally couldn't help but turn his head slightly after walking a few dozen steps, quickly glancing behind him. He saw the female Taoist priest Xianxia walk out of the veil. She wasn't wearing a Daoist robe, but a light blue palace dress made of chiffon. Her black hair was loose and unadorned. She was barefoot, and her feet were as smooth and delicate as white jade. She stood on the grass and looked up at the sky for a while, then turned to look at the warrior who had walked away. The silver-armored warrior saw her face, half covered by her black hair, and a pair of eyes that were as bright as the stars in the night sky. He hurriedly withdrew his gaze, not realizing that his heartbeat and footsteps had sped up because of his nervousness. This was the first time he saw the face of the man of Clearwater in 2 years. He could not find any words to describe her beauty. In the wee hours of the morning, the emperor arrived. The emperor was 35 years old this year and was in the prime of his life. He also looked like an emperor, because of the excellent bloodline of the royal family and the improvement of this good bloodline from generation to generation. The emperor was handsome and had a sense of moderation. He had a short beard and came alone. He wore a light yellow robe and a winged crown. She walked across the wide, empty, and deserted lawn and stopped 10 steps away from Taoist Xianxia. Then he slightly lowered his head and stood in the same place, just like how he stood in front of his father when he was the crown prince many years ago, or like how his father stood in front of the Taoist priest Xianxia. The female Taoist priest looked at the sky in a daze. After a while, she saw the emperor from the side. She smiled and waved to him, "Come closer." The emperor took 5 steps forward and stopped. There was a drought in G State. "I was busy at noon, so I came a little late. Please don't blame me." The female Taoist priest smiled and shook her head. "You've been busy recently, but you have to take care of your health. You're thinner than when you came on New Year's Eve. You don't like meat, but you have to eat. Eat meat to have strength. Don't believe in eating light food. Eat all kinds of things. Don't be picky and your health will not be bad." The emperor nodded. "You're right. I remember." As for me, the female Taoist priest looked at him seriously. "No matter what, you're still the emperor." "Yes, remember." The Taoist priest Xianxia said again. This time it's about the city of Wei. Looking at the current situation of the city of Wei, what do you plan to do? She was indescribably beautiful, but she was slovenly dressed. Now she stood on the grass like a man, barefoot and with her hands behind her back. She looked even more majestic than the emperor of the Qing kingdom. The emperor stood in front of her like a student answering a teacher's question. He hesitated for a while and said, I heard there were many rumors after the upheaval. For example, they saw the soul of the last emperor of the previous dynasty. The situation in the city of Wei was indeed not stable a few days ago. But now that people from Daotong and Kenzhou have arrived, it's not a good idea to keep the city of Wei outside. I plan to use a moderate and peaceful person to go to the city of Wei. Someone who can manage the people's livelihood and knows how to be patient and not clash with Daotong and Kenzhou. Zhou Xian will be the first choice. The Taoist priest Xianxia nodded slightly. Zhou Xian is indeed a suitable candidate. But I don't want the emperor to care about the city of Wei. The emperor was stunned. Then he said, You must have your reasons for doing this. The world is going to be in chaos. The Taoist priest Xianxia took 2 steps forward. Her bare feet stepped on the soft grass. Because of her movements, they were exposed under her dress. The emperor quickly glanced at those feet and then quickly looked away, suppressing his emotions. Because Emperor Li became a ghost emperor and killed the cultivators of Daotong and Kenzhou. This was the start. Then Daotong lost 2 people in the city of Wei. This further fermented. And the background is that the people have been prosperous for thousands of years. The world's population has been increasing. Once there are more people, there will be more demons. So, at this time, whether or not Emperor Li is there, whether or not people die in the city of Wei, there will be a war. This war will affect the entire world. No country will be able to escape. The Taoist priest Xianxia turned to face the emperor. Emperor, you have often lamented to me that the world is not fair. Daotong and Kenzhou are the barriers of the world. Now you should know that this war is a good time to break this barrier. After saying this, the Taoist priest Xianxia was silent for a moment. Then a smile appeared on her face. Just like if you don't leave me, you can't be a true emperor. If the world doesn't leave Daotong and Kenzhou, it can't be a true world. They make the world peaceful and stable, but they also make the world lose its vitality. No one likes to be kept in captivity, right? The emperor was slightly startled and blinked. He didn't know if he should say yes. He wasn't sure if Taoist Xianxia was asking if he didn't like that he couldn't leave her or if it was the latter part. But soon his confusion was answered. You are a good emperor. You should be a true emperor. The Taoist priest Xianxia lowered her eyes and sighed. I should go. Leave me and you can be a true emperor. And I am going to do what I have been waiting for. I will make the world a world of the people, not a world of Daotong and Kenzhou. The emperor was stunned. After a moment he lost his composure and took a step forward. You are leaving. You have to grow up. The Taoist priest Xianxia looked at him. You should know that there is a man named Li Yunxin in the city of Wei. I want to see how far he can go. I know him. But the emperor didn't care about this name. He asked eagerly, When will you come back? This time the Taoist priest Xianxia was silent for a long time. Then she said, You should hope that you will never see me again. If you see me again, it means that I have failed. How to do things, someone will tell you again. The emperor took another step forward and even wanted to reach out to hold her. But he only caught a little light. The moment he took a step forward, the figure of Taoist Xianxia gradually faded. The emperor heard the last words she left behind. Don't be afraid. Chapter 222. Don't be afraid. In the dim light, the Daoist priest said to a black cat under the table, Daotong wants to get rid of big demons. They won't care about little things like you. The Daoist priest looked like he was in his 30s and had an ordinary face. He wore a Daoist robe that flowed like water and shone brightly. His voice was accompanied by the sound of the wind. However, the sound of the wind didn't come from his throat. It came from outside the window. The room wasn't big and had simple furnishings. There was a bed, a table, and a stool. The walls were made of a single piece of rock and so were the doors and windows. However, there was no paper on the door or the window. The strong wind whistled in and passed through every crevice in the room, trying to move everything. However, the bed, table and stool were also made of rock. The strong wind couldn't do anything, so it had to rush out again. The Daoist priest seemed to be used to this environment. He took 2 steps in the strong wind and said, "It's not like Daotong didn't take in demons as divine beasts. You have cultivated the heaven's will and reached the emptiness realm after a few months. You are very talented. You can tell me everything that Li Yunxin does and all the details. Then you will make a great contribution to Daotong." At that time, the black cat under the table suddenly spoke softly, "Stupid Daoist priest. Let me go down the mountain first and I will tell you everything, okay?" The Daoist priest didn't answer. Instead he twirled his whiskers and said, "That chicken spirit is in another quiet room. He has said everything that needs to be said. Although his brain is small and his realm is low, he is more reasonable than you. However, his appearance is not good and he doesn't look dignified. You call yourself the chief police fairy. Although it's nonsense, you are beautiful and more like a cultivator than that chicken spirit. Today I came to ask you again. I want you to say it one more time to verify it and to see your sincerity. Whether you say it or not, we already know the general situation. This is your last chance. If you continue to be so stubborn, you will have to give this chance to the demon next door." As the Daoist spoke, the black cat lay on the ground with its 2 front paws tucked into its chest and narrowed its golden eyes at him. When he finished, the black cat yawned loudly, its whiskers trembling slightly, and it said, "The great king used to tell us that this is called the prisoner's dilemma when he talks to us about the mind. The 2 bad guys were locked up. If neither of them confessed, they might be able to escape punishment. If they told the truth, they might be severely punished. If one person tells and the other doesn't, the one who tells will be exonerated, and the one who doesn't will be heavily punished. Foolish Taoist priest. The way you used it, the great king is much more brilliant than you. Save it." The black cat closed its eyes again and rested its head on its front paws. After a while he couldn't help but say, "He's so stupid." The Taoist priest stopped talking. Staring at her coldly for a moment, he pushed the door open and walked out. There was no sound when the stone door moved, but the sound of the wind outside the door grew louder in an instant. The door was closed and the sound of the wind died down. The black cat was still quietly lying under the table and had no intention of jumping out of the window or the door. In fact, the door and the window were not papered or locked. Even an adult could easily crawl out of it. The Taoist priest stepped out of the door and stepped into the void. The sea of clouds surged beneath his feet, and the bright moon hung high above his head. Because there was no flat ground outside the room, but it was suspended in the air. A few hundred meters below the Taoist priest was a sea of clouds. It was a sea of clouds formed by condensation of water vapor due to the extreme height and coldness. On some nights, the sea of clouds would disperse and the view below could be seen. The horizon would show an obvious arc and everything would look so small. There were only faint spots of light on the dark land, and the light could only shine for a short while in the darkness. When the night deepened, the whole world would be plunged into complete darkness. The Taoist priest knew that those small spots of light were the largest and most prosperous human cities in the known world. However, compared to the vast land and the deep darkness, the power and existence of the mortals seemed so insignificant. The Taoist priest had never left the mountain, so he couldn't imagine how sad a life was and how sad a group of people were. From his birth until now, for a total of 46 years, he had always lived on the Cloud Mountain. There were many cultivators like him, born in the Cloud Mountain, cultivated in the Cloud Mountain, and ascended to heaven in the Cloud Mountain. They were interested in the sea of clouds, the sun and the moon, but they were not interested in anything under the sea of clouds. Only the most ambitious and the least ambitious would leave the mountain and go to the mortal world, either to experience the tribulation or to enjoy the glory and splendor. However, in the Taoist priest's eyes, the splendor of the mortal world could not compare to a pot of moonlight on the Cloud Mountain. The Cloud Mountain was right behind him. However, he couldn't see the entire Cloud Mountain right now, because the Cloud Mountain was so huge. It was said that it was transformed from a huge fish called Kuan a long time ago. That huge fish used the great void as an ocean and swam around. Later, it got tired and stopped above the sea of clouds in the heavenly sphere and fell into a deep sleep. The celestials then cast spells on it, turning it into the Cloud Mountain for the cultivators to live in. It was also said that this Kun might wake up one day. Maybe after billions of years or maybe tomorrow. The Taoist priest liked this saying. This made cultivators like them feel like a sharp sword was hanging in their hearts and they couldn't slack off. The room that the black cat was in was on the stone wall of the Cloud Mountain, located at the lowest level. The room to the Cloud Mountain was like a grain of sand to a huge whale. The shape of the Cloud Mountain was indeed like a fish. The Taoist priest hadn't seen its entire appearance, but he had read the ancient records. His current position was probably at the tail of the fish, which was where the 36 paradises imprisoned the evildoers. He stood in the void for a while, and then he flew diagonally upwards in the strong wind. Soon another person flew over from the other side and the two of them met in the moonlight. The newcomer was a Taoist priest dressed in the same way and he was about the same age. The Taoist priest who interrogated the black cat walked side by side with him. After a moment of silence he said, "Stubborn. In my opinion it's best to kill it." The newcomer shook his head and his voice was intermittent in the wind, but it was very clear. Sect Master Kun Wuzi said that we can't kill it and we can't punish it. They might have other uses. One is a demon in the emptiness realm and the other is a demon in the intent realm. If it's the cultivators on the Cloud Mountain, they are not allowed to leave the paradises. The Taoist priest said disdainfully, "What use can they have? Could it be that they can be used in the future?" "It's exactly what you think." The newcomer nodded. Sect Master said that we should keep these two demons alive. In case that Li Yunxin can't be controlled in the lower realm, these two demons can be used to hold him hostage. When the Taoist priest heard this, his eyes widened in disbelief. Can't be controlled. A demon transformed from a Taoist priest who has just reached the true realm. How can it be, can't be controlled? Sect Master always has his reasons. Let's do as he says. The newcomer's tone was also somewhat helpless. The two of them went straight up in the moonlight. Compared to the entire Cloud Mountain, they were like 2 grains of dust next to a huge whale. Chapter 223. Compared to the entire city of Wei, Wuxia and Lily were like 2 grains of dust. The former city of Wei had lost its light and sound after the midnight hour. It was time for the officials and nobles, who had been enjoying themselves every night, to rest. Hundreds of thousands of people lay dormant on the Wei River plain, filled with countless breaths and vitality. But since the arrival of the Daoists, everything changed. The city of Wei was no longer dark. During the day people could only see the sun. But when the sun set and night fell, a group of characters above the city of Wei slowly lit up. No one could understand that group of characters, not even the most knowledgeable headmaster in the city. Because it was the real name characters written by the Daotong Taoists, representing the most original meaning of light in the world. Therefore this character became the sun at night. It floated at an unknown height, emitting a brilliant light. This light made the darkness disappear. The thieves had nowhere to hide, and everyone in the city of Wei truly experienced the power of those immortals. They could make the weather surrender. The Yu family experienced this power earlier than anyone else. When the Taoists arrived, they first appeared in the courtyard of the Yu family. The head of the Yu family, Yu Qi, hurried to welcome them. Wuxia and Lily still remembered the expression of their master and some of the words he said at that time. When he heard the news, he was shocked at first and then revealed a deep and restrained joy. Master, you knew that the Yu family was the most powerful family in the city of Wei. The Yu family had the most connections and the Yu family had the most information. Therefore he knew that the Daotong Taoists needed them to do something that the high and mighty immortals were not suitable to do. This meant that he would eventually become the actual ruler of the city of Wei. No, the actual and nominal ruler. The recognition from the Daotong Taoists was even more legitimate than the secular imperial power. Wuxia and Lily also remembered that it was evening when Yu Qi left. The sun had not set, and there was a brilliant sunset glow on the horizon. This meant that the next day would be a sunny day. In the background, someone was writing the characters that would illuminate the entire city of Wei. That person was a small black dot in the warm sky, and the sky was like a wide wall. Yu Qi solemnly strode out. He was so anxious that he forgot to ask his son Yu Meng to entertain the guests with him. This negligence saved Yu Meng's life. He saw the 36 Taoist priests on the rockery outside the courtyard. They stood talking to each other as if they were in their own garden. Yu Qi stopped about 10 steps away from the Taoist priests and waited quietly for a while. However, after a quarter of an hour no one greeted him. It was as if he did not exist. The head of the Yu clan believed that this was a test from the Immortals. He knew that the people descending from the sky could not be compared to the Immortals, in the former residence in the city of Wei. They could even write in the sky. Most of the time, the Taoist priests who appeared in the secular world tried their best to avoid shocking the world. Thus, he suppressed the complex emotions in his heart and continued to quietly wait for another quarter of an hour. Still no one took any notice of him. The members of the Yu clan gradually gathered, watching this awkward scene in the forest outside the wall and through the crack of the door. Yu Qi finally coughed and said, "Everyone, Sendo. I am Yu Qi. Everyone, Sendo, you have come to my house." One of the Taoist priests turned to look at him, but the others were still talking. They seemed to be discussing a problem that was still unresolved. Yu Qi thought that it might have something to do with him. For example, what role would the Yu clan play in the future? How much power would they get? While these thoughts were still in his mind, he heard the Taoist priest say indifferently, "Oh, it's you." The Taoist priest did not stop after saying this and went straight to the main topic. Previously, when the demon Li Yunxin caused trouble in the city, your clan colluded with him and harmed the people in the city. You have committed a heinous crime and have become a demon. Today I am here to eliminate the demon. Yu Qi was shocked. The situation was completely different from what he had imagined. Several thoughts flashed through his mind, thinking about how to explain himself so that he would appear sincere and not be looked down upon by the other party. Thinking of this, he found that the Taoist priest raised his hand and pointed at him. Yu Qi felt that the other party was looking down on him. Condemnation or harsh words were after all just words. There was still room for negotiation. But what was the point of pointing at his nose like a rough person in the marketplace? So he frowned and said, "This," but he misunderstood the Taoist priest's meaning. The Taoist priest did not want to point at his nose and scold him. A transparent ray of light shot out from the Taoist priest's fingertip and hit his forehead. At this moment, his entire body suddenly became transparent and then lost its color. His body turned gray, into a lump of ash that retained the silhouette of when he was alive. Some people could not hold back and screamed. Some screamed and ran away while others stood rooted to the ground. But the Taoist priest did not pay attention to them and continued to participate in the discussion, as if the person he just killed was not the most powerful person in the city of Wei, but an insignificant commoner. Wuxia and Lily witnessed everything. They immediately turned around and walked towards the back of Yu Meng's house. It took half an hour to walk from the courtyard to the back of the house. The two girls used this time to shed some frightened tears, said some comforting words to each other, thought of a few countermeasures and finally calmed themselves down. The Yu house was huge. When they walked through the moon gate of the back of the house, the noise in the courtyard in the front courtyard had disappeared. The sky darkened and the moon rose. Against the fairy tale-like curtain of night, there was still a Taoist priest continuing to write that character in the sky. There was a low chirping sound from the flowers and trees in the backyard. There was no light in the room. Ever since the god that he possessed disappeared, Yu Meng loved to sleep. He would take a long nap at the quietest time of the afternoon and wake up only when the moon rose. He would drink some cold porridge, sit in a daze for a while and then recover his energy. Wuxia and Lily entered the door. Wuxia pursed her lips and walked to the small stove in the wing room. Lily went straight to Yu Meng's bedroom. She gently pushed the door open and peeked through the crack in the moonlight. Yu Meng was still sound asleep, snoring softly. But the sound was intermittent. Based on past experience, she knew that he was about to wake up. So she closed the door and quietly left the room. When Lily brought the 2 bags to the wing room, Wuxia had already started a fire under the stove and poured the lotus seed porridge that the 2 girls were supposed to eat at noon into the pot. She added water and began to boil the porridge. They didn't speak. Wuxia took the package from Lily and took off the skimpy underwear he was wearing. He changed into the thick and sturdy dark-colored underwear in the package. Then she removed all the accessories from her hair bun and put them into the bag, tying her hair into a ponytail. Then she carried a small sword out of the door and leaped onto a tree by the wall of the courtyard. She hid her body in the dense canopy and looked down at everything around her. Lily helped her boil the porridge and scooped it out. When the porridge was slightly cold, she took out a paper bag and poured all the white powder into it. After thinking for a while, she added another bag. Then she used silver chopsticks to mix it evenly, tasted a little and silently frowned. The powder was said to be colorless and tasteless, but there was always a bad smell if you put too much of it and it had some lumps. She sighed, soaked the bowl of porridge in the cold water from the well and fanned it. After another quarter of an hour, she heard the sound of someone turning over in the room and 3 short cries of birds coming from the tree. Lily carried the moist porridge bowl into the inner room. Yu Meng woke up and stared blankly at the top of the bed. When he heard Lily open the door and enter, he said in a lazy and deep voice, "Don't light the lamp, it's dazzling." Lily didn't light the lamp. She carried the bowl to Yu Meng's side and sat on a low stool. She scooped a spoonful of porridge and blew on it, softly saying, "Eat some porridge and wake up. It's time to eat." Yu Meng muttered a few words and said he didn't want to eat dinner. Then he arched his body and moved his head to the side of the bed to rest on Lily's lap and opened his mouth. Lily smiled and fed him a mouthful. Yu Meng ate and smacked his lips. "Bitter." Lily still smiled and snorted, "You're hot and your mouth is bitter, but it's not the porridge that's bitter. Wuxia and I stayed up all afternoon in the smoky courtyard for you, but you said it's bitter. Our good intentions were wasted. Since it's bitter, then don't eat it. Pour it, spill it, it's fine." After saying that, she made to leave. Yu Meng hurriedly wrapped his arms around her waist and begged, "Okay, Lily isn't angry. That's because I'm hot and my mouth is bitter. Feed me more, I'll eat it all." Lily's anger hadn't dissipated. She only stuffed the small porridge bowl into his hand and stood up with her hands on her hips. "Eat it yourself. If you eat it all, I'll be angry again." Yu Meng hurriedly sat up straight and didn't say anything. He raised his head and poured the porridge into his throat, then looked at Lily and smiled. "You see, He only said 3 words before he fell back onto the bed with a plop. 3 hurried bird cries came from outside the window. Lily ran out of the room and went to the wing room to change into the short clothes in the bag. Then she found a wheelbarrow from the back of the room. After a quarter of an hour, Yu Meng was moved onto the wheelbarrow and covered with a straw mat. At this time, more than an hour had passed since Yu Meng was killed by the Daotong Taoist with 1 finger. Later they found out that in this hour many important people in the city came to the Yu mansion. Some were informed by the Taoists, while others came because they had enmity with the Yu family. After hearing such great news, they came to see if they could take advantage of it. The Yu family was a colossus. However, once Yu Meng was killed by the Daotong Taoists, this colossus would become a piece of fresh meat. No one could save them if they became enemies with the Daotong Taoist. Therefore, countless beasts followed the smell of blood and began to tear and devour this colossus. The people Wuxia saw from the tree finally arrived at the Moon Gate. They didn't look like members of the Yu family. Instead, they looked like gangsters and wanderers from the nearby streets. They held sticks and even 2 short knives in their hands. They aggressively barged in, thinking that there should be a lot of treasures in the Yu family's house. One of them had just stepped into the Moon Gate when a bolt of lightning shot out from the shadow beside him. The lightning hit the person's throat. He didn't make a sound. He covered his throat and fell down with his eyes wide open. The sudden turn of events stunned the dozen people behind him. Then they saw a girl dressed in short clothes and holding a short sword walk out from behind the door. She looked at them coldly and said, "Us sisters came first. You have to pay attention to the rule of first come, first served. If you want to get rich, go elsewhere. If you insist on barging in, I'll send you to see the king of hell." The newcomers were part of the mob that took advantage of the Yu mansion. They didn't know some of them before. Now that they had lost one of their men as soon as they met, they knew that this young lady's methods were superb and she was ruthless. Among the dozen or so of them, none of them had taken a human life. They came for money after all. They wanted to retreat when they saw a tough bone. After saying a few harsh words, they planned to leave. But just as they finished speaking, they heard a muffled groan from behind them. They hurriedly turned around like startled rabbits. They discovered that a girl dressed in the same clothes stood behind them. The small sword in her hand was still dripping with blood. The ground was also covered with their people. "I've changed my mind." This girl, who was actually Lily, stared at them and said, "Since you're here, don't leave. There's a lot of treasures in this courtyard. I can't move them all. You guys come and help move them. Send us sisters out of the Yu mansion. All the treasures you picked up will belong to you and your lives will also belong to you. But if your claws aren't clean while you're walking, I'll immediately seal your throat. Now get in the door." After a quarter of an hour, the dozen or so hooligans obediently escorted the two ruthless girls through the huge Yu mansion and out the back door. At that time the mansion was already in chaos. People from all walks of life came in and there was no government to control them. Normally the Yu mansion had private guards, but it was Dao Tong who killed people. It was like the emperor of the capital passing down the order to execute the whole family. As long as one had a family, who would dare to be a loyal servant at this critical juncture? They met a few groups of people, some of whom were already in a killing frenzy. However, there were also a dozen or so people escorting the small wheelbarrows and carrying bags of various sizes. Looking at their appearances, they were indeed people who mingled in the marketplace. Therefore, after giving each other a few fierce glances, they parted ways. They walked out for a long time. The sky suddenly brightened. Although it was a full moon night, the moonlight was limited. Wuxia and Lily planned to leave the city that night. But at that moment, it was as if a night sun appeared in the sky above the city of Wei. All the shadows and darkness were dispelled. The gentle and bright light illuminated everyone. People subconsciously looked up at the sky. What they saw was not the dazzling sun during the day. Instead, it was a mysterious character that emitted gentle light. The Taoist priest in the sky finished writing the character. The hooligans had never seen such a scene. Moreover, they were not very courageous. Taking advantage of the moment when Wuxia and Lily were in a daze, those people scattered and ran in all directions with their bags. But the two little girls didn't care about their bags. Instead, it was Yu Meng on the wheelbarrow. The two girls pushed the wheelbarrow and walked for a while on the street filled with people. They saw the city gate from afar. They found that there were people who looked like Taoists guarding the gate. They did not know if they were immortals or secular Taoists, but they did not dare to take the risk. So they turned back. After struggling for 4 hours in the bright darkness, they finally rested in a deserted garden. They used too much medicine and could not predict when he would wake up. In one of the houses in the deserted garden, they made a bed with the skin of a bag and carried Yu Meng to sleep. Then Wuxia and Lily counted the amount of silver and jewelry they brought out under the startling white light outside the window. Which could be used directly, which could only be used after the Yu residence's seal was removed, which jewelry could be exchanged for cash and which could be easily identified. After half an hour the bed creaked and Yu Meng groaned in pain. He opened his eyes slightly. Wuxia and Lily looked at each other, put down the things in their hands and slowly knelt in front of Yu Meng's bed. Yu Meng was still muddle-headed, but the room was well lit and he could see the two girls clearly. He was slightly startled, then he heard Wuxia say, "In the afternoon people from Dao Tong came to our house and killed Master. He was a true member of the orthodoxy, not someone from the encampment. Lily and I were afraid that young Master would seek revenge, so we drugged young Master and brought him out. Now that the Yu family is gone, the people in the house have also dispersed. We deserve to die for setting young Master up for being unjust and unjust. If young Master wants to seek revenge, please kill the two of us first." Yu Meng listened to them in a daze. He stared in silence for a while. Then he said, "Ah. Note 1. Period of Z is from 23 p.m. to 1 a.m. Chapter 224. Yu Meng remained in the same position after the subconscious, and fell into a long daze. After a quarter of an hour he asked in an indecipherable tone, "Did you bring my sword?" Lily took out his sword from under the straw mat of the wheelbarrow. The gorgeous gemstones on the scabbard and hilt shone brightly under the light of the talismans. She walked into the house and handed the sword to Yu Meng, then knelt down again. Yu Meng held his sword in silence for a while, then said, "I don't blame you. Leave me alone for a while." Wuxia and Lily looked at each other, then left quietly. But before closing the door, Wuxia poked his head in again, lowered his eyes and said, "Young Master, before the Taoist killed Master, he said he was working for Li Yunxin and was an accomplice of the demon. We suffered a calamity because of him." Yu Meng looked at Wuxia with dull eyes and said in a low voice, "I can't blame him." So Wuxia left. They sighed softly to each other. Then, carrying the small sword that was still stained with blood, he walked around the deserted garden. They couldn't remember whose family this garden belonged to. It was located in a remote area of the city of Wei, next to a section of the city wall. It had been abandoned for a long time, covered with green weeds and trees. The two girls had been worried and tormented for a long time tonight, but they didn't feel sleepy at all. Their minds were numb and they could only think in one way. They patrolled the garden under the sunlight, guarding against the ruffians and wanderers who might sneak in. Beside them was the rustling sound of the grass and trees swaying in the wind, and there seemed to be people shouting in the distance. Wuxia and Lily walked around the garden and returned to Yu Meng's house. They found that the young master hadn't come out yet, and they felt like two pieces of fallen leaves. The night passed with the sound of roosters crowing. In the morning there was still no one chasing after them. Wuxia changed her clothes and went to the street from the hidden back door of the garden. She found that the street wasn't so chaotic anymore. There were people patrolling the street. The people patrolling the street were not government officials, and she even recognized one of their faces. Thus, she realized that the other aristocratic families in the city had banded together to maintain order. His master had wondered whether he would become the rightful ruler of the city of Wei, but now it seemed that the answer was no. It was the hounds and sharks that controlled the city of Wei. She walked for a long time before she found a noodle shop. After buying some breakfast, he frowned. He didn't know if his young master could eat this kind of thing. However, he wasn't in a hurry to return. Instead, he wanted to gather some information. He found out that Yu Qi wasn't the only one who died last night, and the Yu family wasn't the only one who was destroyed. Almost all those who had supported the dragon cult or helped the dragon cult in the past were killed. The Daoist priests didn't care what kind of difficulties those people had. For example, Yu Qi believed that Dao Tong was the backer of the dragon cult, and the heads of the other aristocratic families might have been threatened by the Yu family. They killed those who had helped the dragon cult, eliminating only the main culprit. But just like the Yu family, if the Taoist priests killed one person, the hounds and sharks would kill many people. Wuxia did not know if the Taoist priests understood this point. The Taoist priests weren't interested in her young master. But there would be many other people who would be interested. For the first time in more than 10 years, Wuxia felt that the city had become frightening and strange, like a ferocious beast. And she herself was like a speck of dust. The morning sun rose, drowning out the light emitted by the talisman hanging above the city of Wei. This made Wuxia feel a little more at ease. She left and returned to the abandoned garden before the street became crowded. She saw Lily sitting on a stool outside the house with a small sword in her arms. She stared blankly ahead because she was too sleepy. A spider spun a small web between her ponytail and the wall. There were tiny dewdrops on the spider silk. Wuxia walked over, brushed away the spider web on her head, and stuffed 2 warm sugar cakes into her hands. She asked, "Where's the young master?" "He's sitting still," Lily said. She stared at the sugar cake for a while before realizing what it was. She brought it to her mouth and took a bite. But obviously she couldn't taste it, so she swallowed it as food. Wuxia stretched out her hand and gently touched her sister's face. She pushed the door open and walked in. Yu Meng looked up at her, then lowered his gaze. The young master of the Yu family hugged the gorgeous long sword in his arms, as if he was hugging a walking stick or a tree that he could lean on. His eyes were big, and at this moment they were even bigger. It was as if he was angry with something invisible, or as if he was practicing some strange martial arts. He stared at his hand as if there was a big secret hidden there. Wuxia called him, but he didn't respond. The girl gently placed the cake wrapped in oil paper on the wooden table beside his bed. She walked to his side and slowly sat down. Yu Meng didn't object, nor did he move. The two of them sat in silence for a while. Wuxia slowly leaned her head on Yu Meng's shoulder, narrowed her eyes and said, "Young master, we're all very sleepy." Yu Meng still didn't respond. Wuxia leaned on nothing, she leaned on Yu Meng. Yu Meng fell down with his head up, his eyes still open. The girl was so scared that she almost screamed. She immediately reached out to feel his breath, only to find that his breathing was even and stable. She was stunned for a while. Then she remembered something. Her young master Yu Meng learned from water-dispelling sword Lu Gongjiao. Wuxia and Lily also practiced martial arts, but they knew they weren't as good as their young master. And how good was their young master? They actually didn't know. But they knew about the legend of their young master's teacher, Lu Gongjiao. It was said that when he practiced water-dispelling sword to a very high level, he could reach the stage where he and his sword became one. There was a mysterious saying that Lu Gongjiao usually hugged his sword to sleep, and his soul would reside in the sword. If his family or friends came while he was sleeping, the sword wouldn't respond. If an evil person with bad intentions came, the soul residing in the sword would immediately sense it and fly up to kill. In the past it was just a rumor. No one dared to test a hero like Lu Gongjiao. But now that Wu Su saw her young master, she was stunned, subconsciously covering her mouth, and didn't speak for a long time. Until she heard the sound of the door opening. Lily poked half her head in, her face green with worry and sleepiness. She widened her eyes and gestured to Wu Su. Wu Su hurriedly carried his sword and walked out, closing the door. Look. Lily immediately pointed to a place about 10 steps away from the door. Wu Su looked over and her expression changed. The road leading to the door was originally paved with green flagstones, but now weeds grew in the cracks of the flagstones. But at least it wasn't as lush as the grass on both sides, and she could see the ground. She saw a small bundle lying on the flagstone. The white flower on a blue background had already been untied. I was leaning against it and accidentally closed my eyes for a while. Lily said. In a flash I opened my eyes and it was there. I opened it and there were 15 taels of silver, 2 bottles of medicine for injuries, 8 plasters, and this. She opened her hand and in her palm was a small piece of paper half the size of a palm. Some words were written crookedly on the paper. Her young master had written better than this when he first learned to read at the age of 5. You long show met Danan, unable to repay you, so I sent some money and medicine to express my sincerity. Wu Su frowned, thinking that there was at least one wrong word, maybe 2 or 3. But the meaning was clear. Someone said that Yu Meng Longsho was in trouble, so he sent money and medicine to express his sincerity. But this also meant. Wu Su and Lily looked at each other uneasily. This meant that someone had discovered their hiding place. Yu Meng used to be the dragon head of an escort agency that didn't care about business. The master of the Yu clan Yu Meng had many enemies, but the young master of the Yu clan Yu Meng didn't have many enemies. Not only did he not have many, but he was very popular. Who would hate a rich young master who was always smiling and throwing money around? Perhaps some family had received help from Yu Meng when they were in trouble, so now they wanted to express their gratitude. But it seemed to be a small character and only dared to do this, not daring to get into trouble. But the problem was that person knew they were here. Where were the others? Maybe that person had sent them a baggage to remind them that they shouldn't stay here for long. At this moment 2 sounds of something breaking through the air were heard, heading straight for the 2 girls. Wu Su and Lily were already prepared, and immediately leaped forward to avoid the hidden weapons. But the sound did not stop and followed closely. The 2 girls dodged left and right, and in a few breaths, they were forced to move 2 feet away from the house by a dozen or so hidden weapons. The other party seemed to be purposely chasing them away, and they didn't know how many people were lying in ambush. Wu Su took the opportunity to disperse her internal energy and shouted, "Young master! Someone's coming!" But Yu Meng didn't react in the house, but the breath she had when she leaped and moved had dissipated. Unable to dodge in time, she could only use the small sword in her hand to block an incoming hidden weapon. But when the hidden weapon hit the sword, it wasn't the sound of metal colliding. With a poof, a white mist exploded and covered Wu Su's entire head and face. When she smelled it, she knew something was wrong and hurriedly shouted, "Close your eyes." She and Lily closed their eyes, held their breath, and leaped 2 steps to the side, rolling into the weeds and finally out of the range of the hidden weapons. But they were also far away from the house where Yu Meng was. Lime. Lily gritted her teeth, feeling that the other party was extremely despicable. The ambushers appeared. A total of 8 people stood up from the bushes in the distance, looking like they came in from the back door. Wu Su didn't know if she had exposed herself when she left the house. Perhaps she was usually very careful and cautious, but now, she was sleepy and she was worried and nervous. There were many things that could not be done well just by being hot-blooded and ruthless. She was tired, so her eyesight and hearing weren't as good as before. This was something that ordinary people couldn't change. There were 8 people in front of them and she and her sister were both tired and sleepy. However, even if the 2 of them could easily escape from the hands of these 8 people, they might not be able to protect their young master. They were not Daoist priests or swordsmen. They could only rely on the small swords in their hands, martial arts and courage. But in front of these 8 people, these things couldn't help them fight against 10 people. They couldn't even fight against 4 people. Those 8 people, no matter how you looked at them, weren't the gangsters and wanderers who could be easily frightened last night. Wuxia and Lily didn't know what would happen to their young master. If they experienced this, they also didn't know what would happen. At this time, a strong man among the 8 people slowly walked towards the house and spoke. His tone was slow and clear, and his voice was filled with malice and arrogance. Everyone says that you families Yulongshou's martial arts are outstanding. In the end, he has to rely on these 2 girls to protect him. If you have real skills, I'd really like to see how powerful you are. Lily knew that the other party was provoking them to talk so that they could find their position. But she just couldn't take this lying down. So she pinched her throat and called out with an indistinct voice that couldn't be distinguished. See? You idiot, I'm afraid you'll dirty my young master's hands. If you want to talk about real skills, those who have seen my young master's real skills are now drinking tea with the king of hell. You really don't want to live long. When the strong man heard her words, he was slightly stunned. But he quickly calmed down and laughed. Your young master still hasn't shown his face or made a sound. So what if he has real skills? Is he seriously injured and about to die? But someone paid for his life, and if he dies, they won't pay. I think you're just bluffing. Brothers, ignore those 2 girls, rush in and catch you, Meng. The people behind him had already slowly surrounded the house. When they heard him say this, they responded in unison and were about to rush into the house. Wuxia and Lily's hearts were squeezed to their throats. The 2 girls weren't worried that their young master couldn't beat these 8 people. But they didn't know if their young master would be willing to fight these 8 people. Seeing his pitiful look, Wuxia and Lily felt that his heart was dead and he didn't want to live anymore. They really didn't know if it was the right thing to do to drug him and bring him out last night. Just as they couldn't bear it anymore and were about to rush out, they heard another voice coming from the roof behind them. Wuxia and Lily jumped in fright. What kind of skill did it take for the 2 of them to not notice? They turned around to look. Then they saw a man standing on the roof. The man was dressed in black and wore a black bamboo hat. He held a black knife in his arms. He had a broad and strong chin with stubble on it. It seemed like he didn't have time to take care of his appearance because he had been living in the wilderness for the past few days. I'll protect this person, the man in black said in a low and powerful voice. After saying this, he used the handle of the knife to push up the brim of the bamboo hat, revealing a pair of bright eyes. If you know what's good for you, go away. Wuxia and Lily were a little stunned. They didn't know who this person was and why he was so arrogant. The 8 people were naturally even more stunned. They didn't know when he appeared, nor did they know who he was. But the man in black's steady aura shocked them. The strong man who spoke first raised the knife in his hand and pointed it at him. You're so arrogant, aren't you afraid that the wind will cut your tongue? The person that we, the 8 tigers of Wei River, want to capture. How can you protect him? Chapter 225. But the man in black did not pay attention to them. Instead, he looked down at the 2 girls in the bushes and slightly raised his chin. I heard that your family was killed because you helped Li Yunxin. Is that true? Wuxia and Lily looked at each other and were slightly stunned. But they only spent a little time thinking about how to answer this question. Wuxia pulled Lily up slowly. My family did many things for the dragon cult. The leader of the dragon cult is called Li Yunxin. She said carefully and carefully looked at the man in black's eyes. The man smiled. You 2 are quite skilled. The man in black said casually, are you under Madame Nia? Wuxia and Lily looked at each other in surprise again. They suddenly felt strength in their hearts but also lost it. Yes. I've fought with her a few times. Except that she doesn't like to talk, she's good everywhere. The man in black ignored Wuxia and Lily and walked 4 steps forward on the roof. He stood at one end of the house and said to the strong man, you bastards always like to use such names. What 8 tigers of Wei River, 6 ghosts of the river. Sounds scary, but what are they? He shouted at them sternly, I'm not in a good mood today and don't want to kill anyone. Get out now. The name 8 tigers of Wei River sounded like small fries to a master. However, to the common people of the secular world he was notorious. At least in the city of Wei, everyone knew that these 8 were highly skilled in martial arts and could be ruthless enough to kill. Such people roamed the martial world and heard the man in black's tone. Although they were not convinced, they knew that the man in black had a powerful background. But, Thinking of Yu Meng, who was worth 1,000 taels of silver, they were not afraid. Thus he wasn't that afraid anymore. The strong man snorted. You do know about the 6 ghosts of the river. Do you know that the 6 ghosts of the river are the teachers of the 8 tigers of Wei River? In the past we might have given you face. But today, even if you tell us your name, we won't buy it. If you want to protect us, let's see who's the real deal. The black-clothed man suddenly laughed and said something that made people scratch their heads in confusion. What a good to see the real deal. These days I've met some weird people and suffered some vexation. Now even trash like you dare to look down on me. But since I've killed the 6 ghosts in the river out of the Wei River, it's not good for me to kill the 8 tigers of the Wei River. I don't want my friends to say that I'm not benevolent enough. Since you dare to ask me to show my true abilities, then leave the guy who makes a living here. After he finished speaking, the strong man's expression changed. The more he listened, the more he felt that something was wrong. The more he listened, the more frightened he became. By the time he realized that something was wrong, he had already seen the black-clothed man leap up from the roof, a black saber blotting out the sky as it slashed towards him, and, in the air, he forced out a blade ray. The blade's gleam caused the brawny man's courage to explode. He dropped the dagger in his hand and turned around to flee. He shouted in horror, Motherf ***, it's black blading Jurin. Although he ran fast, he was not as fast as the blade's gleam. As soon as the brawny man's voice fell, the next moment, blood shot up into the sky from his side. When Ingju Ran said that he was going to take his food, he was going to take his arm. The 6 ghosts in the river were good at using swords. They taught the 8 tigers of the Wei River a set of third-rate saber techniques, but the 8 tigers practiced it to a 4th-rate one. But from now on he probably could not even use a 4th-rate saber technique anymore. With a muffled groan, he fell straight down in the wild grass. However, his 7 brothers were also loyal to their friends. They stopped running but turned around and looked at Ingjuren with their sabers in hand. It seemed that they would live and die together. The brawny man whose arm was cut off tried his best not to faint. He covered the wound on his right shoulder with his big hand. He stared at Ingjuren with his eyes wide open and blue veins popping on his forehead. Ingjuren walked in front of them and smiled coldly. You have some loyalty. But when I said I want you to make a living, I only want you to make a living. Go back and tell the mastermind behind this. I don't care about the affairs of cultivators. The affairs of the Jianghu people. In this river my words still carry weight. Yu Meng is under my protection. If there are any brothers in the Jianghu who don't understand, feel free to ask my black saber. The brawny man was in so much pain that he could not speak. He was relying on his survival instinct to hold on. His 7 brothers did not dare to speak. They were afraid that if they said something wrong, they would end up like him. Li Yunxin might feel surprised at this scene, but Lu Laodao might feel that it was only natural. Because in the eyes of cultivators, no matter how strong a secular martial artist was, they could be solved with a talisman. But in the eyes of a secular person like Lu Laodao and the eyes of the 8 tigers of the Wei River, the difference was too big. For example, people would not bother to distinguish the species and ranks of ants by the roadside. But among the people of the Jianghu, a second-rate expert like the black blading Jurin was already a terrifyingly powerful force. He could force out the gleam of the saber. To the secular martial arts, this was the most unimaginable and closest existence to the Taoism of the gods. As for the 8 tigers of the Wei River, they were not even third-rate. They only had some reputation in the city of Wei because of their martial arts and ferociousness. However, they only realized today that they had provoked the Black Blade, who had made a name for himself in the city of Wei and the Hezhong area. They and the mastermind behind this all knew that the Taoists of Daotong did not care whether the bloodline of the Yu family still existed in the world or not. What they did now was to beat a drowning dog, not for the matters of Daotong, but for the worldly affairs of the common people. But now the drowning dog had latched onto a giant crocodile that was quite terrifying to the Jianghu people. Only the Jianghu people knew the weight of the Jianghu people. The 7 brothers saw that Ingjuren did not say anything else. They hurriedly supported the brawny man who had almost fainted from the pain and ran away like rabbits. At this time Wu Su and Lily came to their senses. The 2 sisters also killed people, but they were not Jianghu people. They learned from the assassin Ye Sanyang, who was also the master you found for them. They were not like other disciples who were taught according to the rules of the Jianghu. Lily was anxious and blurted out, "Why didn't you kill them?" Wuxia hurriedly pulled her back. But Juren had already turned around and smiled mysteriously. He pressed down his black bamboo hat again, revealing only his chin. "Little girl, there are countless people in the Jianghu, how can we kill them all? Your young master is the head of the Dragon of the Escort Association, you should know this. Some things just talk it out, there is no need to see blood. Some things once blood is seen there is no need to take lives. Once life is taken, who doesn't have old relatives, old neighbors, uncles and brothers? If things get out of hand, even someone like Lu Gongjiao who can kill 10 people with one sword, how can he defend against the poison in the inn's food? Today they hurt but didn't kill, they will remember me when they go back. If there are other things in the future, there will be another way. The Jianghu is not created by killing, it is created by walking. Those who kill the most fiercely will also die the fastest." Lily was not very convinced by his words. But she was not a girl who did not understand. She knew that at times like this kind of person was not here to reason with her. So she stopped and pursed her lips. Then, "I still have to thank you." Juren smiled. Just as he was about to speak, he heard the door open. Yu Meng appeared at the door holding his magnificent sword. The young master of the Yu family had dark circles under his eyes, his hair was messy and he looked very embarrassed. But his eyes were very bright. Like a seriously ill patient on his deathbed, burning his last bit of life to force out light. He looked at Wuxia and Lily, then looked at Juren. After a while he said, "Thank you." Juren raised his eyebrows, holding his black knife and looking at Yu Meng. "I have long heard that the young master of the Yu family is very capable. Today I see, you are not injured. Why did you let the 2 girls protect you and hide in the house?" Wuxia clenched her teeth. "Heroing, it is normal for our young master to encounter such a thing. The young master did not want to live, it was my sister and I who drugged him and then smuggled him out. The drug's effect has not worn off yet, so his body is not feeling good." Juren heard this little girl's loyalty in protecting her master, and a slight mocking smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "That is not a reason. The way of martial arts is to press forward, to conquer every obstacle. That is the right way. It is at times like this that one must face life and death. If one does not comprehend in the midst of life and death, how can one achieve divine kung fu? I will not use my sword anymore." Juren was talking excitedly when he suddenly heard Yu Meng say this in a low voice. Although his voice was low, it was very powerful. It did not sound like the words of a dispirited person, but more like he was using a low voice to express his determination. Juren was stunned. He saw Yu Meng leaning on the door frame, holding the sword in his arms tightly, looking at Wuxia and Lily, then at him. "Your martial arts is not my martial arts. From today until the day I die, I will only prepare for one sword. If that sword cannot kill the enemy, then kill me." The 3 of them were stunned. Wuxia and Lily looked at each other, not knowing what to say. Juren thought for a while, using the knife hilt to push up the bamboo hat. He looked at Yu Meng seriously, hiding the sword. "I heard that swordsmen used this method in ancient times. But it either hides the person until he is crippled or hides the person until he is dead. But these things are only secular martial arts." Juren sighed. Since Dragon Head is so determined to take revenge, why doesn't he learn Taoist arts? No matter how good his martial arts are, it cannot be compared to Taoist arts and sword techniques. I heard that when Dragon Head was young, something strange happened to him. Taoist arts and sword techniques are useless to me. Yu Meng looked at Juren and said, "I can't cultivate them either." "Who are you?" Juren frowned. He did not understand what Yu Meng meant by, "Taoist arts and sword techniques are useless to me." Did he mean that he could not cultivate them, or was it like that night? That night in the alley, he and Meng Ao saw Li Yunxin's 4 demons killing 2 Taoist priests. He seemed to have heard something similar, something about not being restricted. He did not really understand. Even after listening to Yu Meng's words, he still did not understand. But Yu Meng obviously did not want to continue talking about his privacy, and asked who he was. Juren did not ask further. He smiled slightly. "Dragon Head, you should have heard of my name. I am Black Knife Juren. I live in the river area. I am a Jianghu person." "That's not what I'm asking." Yu Meng's tone was slow, just like how he usually spoke. Usually it was slow because of laziness, but now it was slow because of heaviness. I am Yu Meng, the dragon head of the Daqing State Escort Association, but I also helped the demon Li Yunxin and offended the Daotong people. Who are you? Ingjuren understood. He thought for a while, his face showed a complicated expression. That's why I saved you. I have met Li Yunxin twice. Those 2 times. He paused again, thinking for a while, but still did not know how to say it. He is indeed a demon. If he was not a demon, why did he only meet him twice, which were not peaceful and friendly? Did he really bring the first batch of people from the Black Stockade village to the city of Wei? But he promised me something and now I want to find him. Ingjuren subconsciously licked his dry lips. But he disappeared again and I don't know where he went. There are many rumors in the city but none of them are true. Then I found out about your family. Since your family helped him create such a big scene in the city, you should know where he is. Ingjuren frowned. As if the sun shone through the bamboo hat into his eyes, he had no choice but to do this. I need an explanation. My people are still waiting. Yu Meng took a deep breath, looked at Wuxia and Lily. Go and sleep for a while. I have something to discuss with Brother Black Knife. Yu Meng rarely spoke in such a formal tone. The sisters thought that perhaps their young master had gone through a big change and changed his personality. They did not know if this change was good or bad, but they really needed to rest. After so many things had happened, they needed a good rest to continue taking care of their young master. So Wuxia looked at Yu Meng. Young master, don't. I'll wait for you to wake up. Yu Meng said, we'll settle the score when you wake up. Why did you put so much medicine? This dragon head's head is still hurting. Wuxia and Lily finally felt like crying. But they hurriedly bit their lips to hold it in and quickly walked into the house. Heroing, this way please. The door was closed and Yu Meng led Ingjuren to a faraway place. He hugged his sword, his forehead dripping with sweat because of the heat. When I first saw Li Yunxin, the two walked from the door to a dilapidated pavilion in the abandoned garden. Half of the pavilion had collapsed, but the other half still provided shade. Along the way, Yu Meng briefly described how he first saw Li Yunxin, but it was not the version that he initially thought, but the version that he later learned, met a bad guy. Then he talked about how he met Li Yunxin, the leader of the dragon cult in the city. After he finished, he stood under the pavilion and asked Ingjuren, what was it like when Hero Ing saw him? Ingjuren looked at him in surprise. They had all heard of young Master Yu's forthright reputation. But as famous as forthright was his pure heart, or stupidity. But now that he saw him, he realized that he spoke clearly, and had nothing to do with the word stupidity. I'm not stupid. Yu Meng felt his gaze. It's just that sometimes, only the poor need to think carefully. I used to be rich. Rich and powerful. But now I'm not. Chapter 226. Ingjuren raised his eyebrows and shrugged. He didn't know if he agreed or disagreed with what he said. But he had even seen people like Li Yunxin, so why would he be surprised by Meng? Then when I saw him. Ingjuren thought for a while and said, that night I was going to do something big but he saw me. He helped me out and taught a few people a lesson. Then he told me that I should move the people in my castle to city of Wei. Does Dragon Head you know about Tuyun Mountain? Yu Meng thought for a while and said, there is an escort route in Liangzhou. I heard that there are bandits on the mountain, but they are not bandits. That's reasonable, they didn't do anything bad. Tuyun Mountain is 300 miles away from city of Wei. The bandits on the mountain that Dragon Head you heard about are from the Black Stockade Fort. I am the master of the fort. But not many people know about this. Yu Meng looked at Ingjuren again and said, ah yes. That's what I want to know. Who are you? I am not a bandit. The people in the fort are just a group of people who have no food to eat, so I gathered them together. Ingjuren said in a deep voice, Liangzhou is very poor. But the escort route in Liangzhou is not the safest, nor the most dangerous. This is because the people in the fort don't eat the food of the people but the real bandits. That Li Yunxin is very ambitious. He told me that if I want my fort to survive, I have to talk to the people in the fort about something else. I felt dizzy but it made sense, so I brought people to city of Wei. Ingjuren said this and squinted his eyes to look around. Yu Meng also looked around. The two of them had never fought before, so it was hard to say whose kung fu was stronger. But after all, they were second-rate masters in Jianghu, so it was natural for them to have sharp ears and eyes. So they also saw figures, hidden in the weeds around the abandoned garden. Roughly looking, there were more than 10 people. It seemed that if he really wanted to kill the 8 tigers of Wei River, it would have been effortless. I brought this first batch of people to the city of Wei. Every one of them is an expert, not someone like the 8 tigers can compare to. Ingjuren said, I heard from Li Yunxin's words that the city of Wei is already in his pocket. He asked our people to come here and help him take over the city. But this time when he brought people here, what he saw was the current situation. Not only is he not to be found, but the town is being searched for those who were formerly associated with him. Now that the city has been sealed, we can't act rashly. We can only see if we can find out. Ingjuren looked at Yu Meng. If he's dead, we'll go back to Mount Chuyun. If Dragonhead Yu knows where he is, what he is doing and what plans he has, we can wait and see. Yu Meng frowned. You still want to wait for him? People from Daotong had taken over the city of Wei. He probably didn't stand a chance anymore. Why do you believe him? The question should have been difficult to answer. However, Ingjuren did not hesitate. He shook his head. I don't believe him. But, on the way back to the castle, I thought about what he said that night. No one said it like him. I mean, no one said it to me, and I didn't hear anyone say it to others. At first, I thought it was nonsense. But after thinking about it carefully, I found it made sense. Then I went back to the castle and thought about what he said in the past, and at that time, Ingjuren sighed. I realized that if I don't care about the castle and let it slowly collapse, I can lead these people to do something good. Either I want to do something with these people, I want to hear and learn more from him. No, Dragonhead Yu, I know what you want to say from your expression. I'm not just a martial artist. My ancestor was a scholar of the Yi dynasty. When I was young, my family was rich and I studied. Even now I still study. Although I don't think I'm as knowledgeable as everyone else, I'm not ignorant. No scholar in the world can say what he said. So it's not that I believe him. I just want to find him and see how he is. I'll help if I can. If I can't, I'll listen to his reasoning. If I can't, I'll go back to Chiyun Mountain. Dragonhead Yu, do you know how to find him? Yu Meng smiled faintly. This was the first time he smiled since Ingjuren saw him. The meaning in his smile was unclear. It was unknown what he was smiling about. Help him. The people of Daotong want to capture him. You're just a man of the Jianghu. How can you help? Do you know who my family used to work for? The Zhao family. The heavenly official of the Ministry of Appointments. The Zhao family that claims to control the Qin kingdom. Last night my father was killed. Yu Meng was silent for a moment. But if you really want to find him, I can try. Take me out of the city first. You really do know? I'm just trying. Yu Meng gently stroked the sword hilt, wrapped in shark skin and inlaid with gems. When the dragon cult wanted to enter the city, I was curious and went to Nanshan to take a look. Apparently they first caused trouble there. Then I heard some rumors about Li Yunxin. It seemed he had been in Egret town for a long time. There should be some clues nearby. The mastering. Yu Meng looked at him seriously. He's not a human. Daotong said he's a demon, but I don't know whether he is or not. Because some people say he's the Wei River Dragon King. Is he a dragon or something? But no matter what, he's a different species. He's fighting with Daotong. It's not something we can do. It's a good thing that Master Ing wants to find a way out for your castle. But if you're not careful and your castle is crushed by Daotong, it won't be a good thing. So I'm just going to take a look. Ingjuren said. When does Dragonhead Yu plan to leave the city? I'll prepare. Wait for them to wake up. They went out of the city at night. It was morning when they met. At night, Yu Meng had already slept for a while. He became the old Yu Meng again. There was no emotion related to sadness on him, except that he was hugging the sword. Wuxia and Lily were worried about this. But now, the night in the city of Wei was no longer dark. It was almost no different from the day. The only difference was that people needed to sleep. Although many people couldn't sleep because of the light and what happened that day, there were fewer people on the streets. The city of Wei was bustling. The houses were built under the city wall. The government ordered that no buildings were to be built within 5 feet of the city wall. But the order was solved by bribery. Anyway, the city of Wei was in the hinterland. If one day the army came to the city, there was no need to defend the city. No one was willing to massacre the entire city like they did a few hundred years ago. So the houses could cover their tracks. They didn't have to deal with well-trained soldiers. but with people who wanted to take revenge on the Yu family. In the morning, Ingjuren taught a lesson to the 8 tigers of Wei River. He said that Yu Meng was under his protection. When they were ready to leave the city at night, these words were effective. Black Knife swaggered on a black horse. Behind him were dozens of good men he brought from the Black Stockade Fort. Yu Meng, Wu Su and Lily were protected in the middle. It was hard not to attract attention when such a group of people walked on the street. But it was also a test. If the Taoist priests of Daotong wanted Yu Meng, they wouldn't be able to leave. If the Taoist priests were not interested in Yu Meng, they could safely walk to the city wall of Wei. But after walking for an hour, no one came to stop them. They met a few groups of people on the way. They stared at them expressionlessly at the entrance of the alley. They didn't say anything and didn't do anything. Or they looked at Ingjuren and nodded at him. They were familiar with each other and told him, "I won't interfere with your business." Some people were tempted. But when they saw the dozens of people behind Black Knife, they shrank back. Ingjuren ordered people to remember them. It seemed that his reputation was still useful. He taught the 8 tigers a harsh lesson. When they were close to the city wall, they turned into the alley and guarded the entrance in batches. Finally, after a few turns, they used the rope ladder they left on the wall to get out of the city. It was scary but not dangerous. The Taoist priests obtained the city easily. But they didn't seem to be able to control it. They didn't care about ants, but ants had their own uses. However, when they got out of the city, it was scary but not dangerous. But when they got out of the city, they were shocked. Ingjuren and his people entered the city one day ago. The night before the Taoist priests killed him. It had only been less than 2 days since they had arrived. Before entering the city, there were fields outside the city of Wei. But now they climbed over the wall and got out of the city. They found the fields were gone. In just 1 day, without any sound, the fields turned into large pieces of flat stone land. The stone land was terrifyingly smooth. The ground in the courtyard of the Yu family was also made of stone. It was inlaid with large pieces of marble. It was so shiny that one could see one's reflection. People had once clicked their tongues in wonder. But it couldn't be compared with this kind of stone land. An area of dozens of acres was just one piece. It was like a mirror that reflected the talisman characters and clouds on the top of the sky. There were hundreds of such mirrors. It seemed that the whole city of Wei was surrounded. And what were the Taoist priests writing on the stone mirrors? Ingjuren and Yu Meng didn't know. But if Li Yunxin was here, he would know that they were setting up arrays. He could set up painting arrays and the Taoist priests could set up book arrays. Although they couldn't be compared with his arrays in terms of scale and style, there were more of them. The 36 Taoist priests in the city of Wei were all advanced Taoist priests. Many Taoist priests of Will's realm and Emptiness realm were doing this manual labor outside the city. But no one seemed to notice them. In fact, the place where they got out of the city was next to a stone mirror. When the first person landed, a young Taoist priest who was writing talisman characters on the mirror turned around and faced the first person. They were only a dozen steps away. But the Taoist priest seemed to see a hare coming out of the grass, or a bird falling from the sky. He glanced at them, turned around, lowered his head and continued his work. A few people in the distance noticed them, but they reacted the same way. Ingjuren didn't know whether he should feel lucky or angry because of being looked down upon. After a quarter of an hour, they walked out of the stone mirrors carefully. They felt their clothes were soaked in sweat. Ingjuren found a familiar face. Chapter 227. In the last quarter of an hour, the 4 people living in the secular world have seen the strangest scene in their lives. From afar they could only see the Taoist priest setting up a formation. But when he carefully walked through it, he noticed even more things. There was a person on each stone mirror. Of course, it meant that they looked like people. Ingjuren saw people with a human body and a fish tail. He saw people with a dog's head and a human's body. There were also people with a human body, but their tongues were forked or they were covered in scales. The only one that didn't look strange had a body that looked like it was made of water. If they weren't careful, it would turn into a puddle of liquid and try to flow away. However, the Taoist priest guarding it silently stamped his foot on the ground fiercely. The liquid rippled as if a stone had been thrown into it. Then it quickly turned back into a human, its face showing an expression of extreme pain. In their shock, the 4 of them realized that it was probably a fiendish demon. But that wasn't the only thing that shocked them. These demons seemed to be the raw materials for the formation. If the formation on some of the stone mirrors was a bit faster, the demon would have already been dismembered. Ingjuren has traveled the world for many years. He's seen a lot of cruel and bloody scenes. He's seen people using knives to cut off the flesh of their enemies and roasting it to eat. And the enemy was still alive, screaming in pain. But that was only the first time, and the one who cut off the flesh was surrounded by powerful enemies, so it was only done to intimidate them. In all the things he's experienced, people always hurt or kill their own kind for other reasons. However, they now saw that the Taoist priests treated the demons as if they were just tools without any life at all. They dismembered a demon and used certain parts of its body to draw a formation. Or if they needed the demon's blood, they would calmly use a tool to extract the blood from its body. Their attitude was calm and serious, not caring about the demon's screams and struggles. Yu Meng and the two girls probably only thought it was cruel. But in the eyes of people like Ingjuren who's seen more than them, this kind of cruelty was even more frightening. But demons are demons, they all know that they aren't the same kind. So they carefully walked forward and didn't cause any trouble. The four people were confused about why the Taoist priests didn't care about them. Because they didn't know, in the eyes of the Taoist priests, they weren't that different from the demons, the birds in the sky and the beasts on the ground. Because of that, Ingjuren saw Xiao Jiasen next to a stone mirror. That stone mirror was next to a forest. In fact, a corner of the mirror went deep into the forest. There were originally a few trees growing on the edge of the stone mirror. The Taoist priests also didn't care about the half-tree, as if they weren't interested in anything other than the formation. The Daoist priests did not pay any attention to the half of the tree. It was as if they were not interested in anything other than writing the formation. This stone mirror seemed to be progressing slowly. Once they reached this point and entered the forest, they would be able to completely leave the area where the Taoist priests were. Thus he slowed down his pace and saw a girl standing at the edge of the stone mirror. Two Taoist priests were talking in low voices about a dozen steps away from her. When Ingjuren saw that girl, he was slightly startled and almost stopped in his tracks. He frowned slightly and walked into the forest. After a dozen more steps, the trees blocked their figures. After a dozen more steps, the trees blocked their figures. Only then did the four of them jog straight into the depths of the forest. When the dense canopy of the trees blocked the sunlight from the sky, they stopped and took a breath. "Wait for them here," Ingjuren said. He frowned as he spoke, as if he had something on his mind. The them he referred to was his entourage. They left in batches in the city to avoid attracting attention. Looking at it now, this was the right decision. Yu Meng could see what was on his mind but didn't say anything. He picked up a thick tree branch with mushrooms and moss growing on its surface and sat down. He took out a water pouch from his waist. He passed it to Wuxia and Lily. The two sisters told young master to drink first. They stood in front and behind Yu Meng to keep watch. Yu Meng slowly drank a mouthful. After listening to the chirping of birds for a while and feeling the wind in the dense forest for a while, someone slowly arrived. After half an hour, almost all of Ingjuren's subordinates had arrived. In actual numbers, there were 3 people missing. They said they were ambushed by another group of people who couldn't help but want to test the waters. One died on the spot, the other was seriously injured. The other stayed in the city with the seriously injured and had to leave a few days later. Yu Meng watched as Ingjuren spoke with his subordinates for a while, then saw him part the crowd and walk in front of the master and servants. "The 3 of you leave first." Ingjuren's expression looked like he had made a difficult decision. "If you need people, I can give you 3. No more than that. I need people to do things." Wuxia and Lily looked at each other. Yu Meng wasn't surprised. "We can't leave first at a time like this," Yu Meng said. "Tell us about Hero Ing. We can help." Ingjuren nodded. "Hey. Dragon's head is righteous. I want to save someone." "When we passed by the stone slab just now, did Dragon's head see a girl? You said there were 2 Taoists guarding it." "Yes." Ingjuren said, "I know that child. His name is Xiao Jiasen. His father is Qiao Duanhong." "Oh? Qiao's Hongfu escort agency." Yu Meng said, "I remember. When I sent Li Yunxin back to the city, Qiao Duanhong was there too. Now that I think about it, that girl was there too. Hero Ing is familiar with her?" Ingjuren sighed slightly. I know Qiao Duanhong. He's an expert around Weiqing. The Qiao family's escort agency was robbed by the 6 ghosts in the river. The 6 ghosts in the river were driven away by me from the vicinity of Weiqing. What happened to them back then was also related to me. Also, the old servant of the Qiao family, Meng Ao, is now the 2nd blade head of my stockade village. He said that if he sees his miss, he hopes I can help her. And Li Yunxin seems to have a deep relationship with the Qiao family. Since all these things have come together, I have to give it a try. Yu Meng was silent for a while, then said, Heroing, have you thought it through? That Qiao Jessen appeared here at this time. You know what we saw before. She could also be a demon. Ingjuren interrupted him. But Li Yunxin is also a demon. Moreover, the martial arts I practice is about advancing forward with indomitable will and having an open heart. If I don't save her when I see her today, it's inevitable that my thoughts won't be clear. In the future, when I reach a critical point in my practice, I might make a mistake. This is a hidden danger, I don't want it. Then, what if I can't save her today? Heroing, do you still want to risk your life? Ingjuren smiled slightly. If things can't be done, then I'll take an unconventional approach, still advancing forward with indomitable will and an open heart. Yu Meng thought for a while. Heroing, you mean, if you can't save her you don't care? Ahem, you can say that. Yu Meng laughed for the 2nd time today. Hero Ying's martial arts are really mysterious. Ingjuren heard the conversation between the 2 Taoist priests earlier. Although it was only a few words and he didn't understand many of the words they said, he could roughly understand the ins and outs. It seemed that they had to wait for the magic circle outside the city wall to be set up before they could do anything here. And these magic circles seemed to be prepared for a big demon in Dongting Lake. Among all the people in this forest, only Ingjuren had the experience of fighting with cultivators. But it didn't seem to be a fight but a one-sided crushing. However, after all, he was an experienced and knowledgeable Jianghu warrior. He knew that once a fight began, there could be many decisive factors. Previously, he didn't know the identity of the 2 Taoist priests, so he underestimated them. Now he brought dozens of good helpers with him and he could prepare in advance. Moreover, it was just to save a person, so it was indeed worth a try. They didn't dare to delay for too long, because they were afraid that the Taoist priest would also dismember Qiao Jessen. But they didn't dare to be too hasty. Ingjuren had experienced the skills of the Taoist priests. Besides, according to Li Yunxin's performance at that time, they were just 2 low-level Taoist priests, which was equivalent to the 8 tigers of Wei River in Jianghu. Therefore it took him 2 hours to draw up 2 or 3 plans. Ingjuren walked out of the forest again. The 2 Taoist priests on the stone mirror were still talking. But it seemed that they had different opinions and their tone was more intense. Ingjuren slowly walked to the side of the stone mirror and stared straight at them. One of the Taoist priests with 5 long beards glanced at him, but he didn't care at all. Ingjuren saw Qiao Jessen. The girl seemed to be tied up by an iron chain and she couldn't move at all. She wore a white shirt and her hair was loose. She pursed her lips and didn't speak. Her big eyes looked left and right as if she was panicking and confused. Ingjuren walked 2 or 3 steps away from her and said in a low voice, Miss Qiao, I'm an old friend of your father. I'm also a friend of Li Yunxin's. I've been entrusted to save you. I've set up an ambush in the forest. As long as I can rush in, I have a 70% chance of escaping. If you can speak, teach me how to untie the iron chain on your body. But Qiao Jessen didn't speak. Her eyes moved back and forth on his body as if he was a child. But the Taoist priests in the distance noticed him. They didn't care before, probably because in their eyes, these mortals couldn't interfere with their business. As long as it did not block his path on paper, he would not be distracted and get up to brush it away. But now that this mortal was talking to their material, things were different. The Taoist priest with 5 long beards frowned slightly and opened his mouth to speak. Ingjuren had already grabbed the iron chain on Qiao Jessen's body and pulled hard. The iron chain was only loosely wrapped around her body. If it was on an ordinary person's body, it would probably fall off after moving a little. But on Qiao Jessen's body, it floated illusory like a phantom. And he just wanted to pull it for a while. If the iron chain didn't move, he would turn around and run, declaring the rescue mission a failure. He knew that he was facing a formidable opponent, and didn't think it was funny to do so. No matter how brave a child is, he wouldn't try to fight a tiger. but unexpectedly he pulled the iron chain. In fact, as soon as his hand touched it, it fell to the ground as if this mortal's fingers had broken some kind of balance. This unforeseen event was something that even Ingjuren himself did not expect. He was even stunned for a moment. After this moment he decisively grabbed Xiao Jessen's hand, turned around and ran. But the problem was that he didn't catch anything. Or rather, he caught a bit of the wind. On a windy day, if you put your palm up to the wind, you will feel the touch of the wind. That's the feeling. Ingjuren was mentally prepared for Xiao Jessen's inhuman state. But at this moment he saw something else from the corner of his eyes. Xiao Jessen's face originally had facial features. But when he pulled it, it was as if the facial features were made up of smoke and disappeared in an instant. Only a pale, smooth face could be seen. A faceless person. This time, Ingjuren's heart really felt like it was hit by a big hammer. Impatience rose in his heart and he almost used his internal energy and his feet slowed down. The Daoist priest not far away finally shouted, "Evil creature, where are you going?" At the same time as the voice came, a talisman in his palm, as fast as lightning, it reached the middle of Ingjuren's back in the blink of an eye. At this critical moment, the faceless Xiao Jessen pounced on Ingjuren's back. Black Knife felt as if a gust of wind pushed him, and he knew it was Xiao Jessen who was helping him. He used his internal energy to take a wrong path, and forcibly raised his chi to jump up to the treetop of an elm tree that was as thick as the mouth of a bull. As soon as his toes touched the tree trunk, he heard a deafening sound behind him. There was a hole as deep as a person where he was standing just now. He didn't dare to hesitate. He swallowed back the mouthful of sweet blood that had rushed to his throat, and dashed left and right according to the route he had checked beforehand. He could only hear the whistling of the wind in his ears, and the branches and leaves were like sharp knives that left small wounds on his cheeks. He didn't have time to listen for whether someone was chasing behind him. That was the job of the ambushers. He only relied on the continuous force behind him to run through the forest like a galloping horse, until the force behind him disappeared. Yu Meng rushed out from the side and held him up. At this time, Ingjuren realized that he had actually run a mile in 3 breaths' time. "Is anyone following us?" they asked almost at the same time. But the forest was very quiet, except for the sound of the wind, birds and the rustling of leaves. No one was chasing after him. The Daoist priest who sent a talisman to Ingjuren didn't even enter the forest. He stood at the edge of the stone mirror and reached out his hand to brush the ground, and the iron chain that tied up Xiao Jessen turned into an ordinary hemp rope. The Daoist priest who had argued with him stood behind him respectfully and said in a low voice, "Great Master, you don't have to do this yourself. He's just a secular person. That's what you should know." The Great Master of the Langya Cave of Daotong looked at the forest for a while, and then said in a low voice, "Don't take anything related to Li Yunxin lightly. I hope you can bring him back to Yunshan instead of him keeping you here." The Daoist priest didn't seem to be convinced. But he didn't dare to contradict the Great Master. So he turned to the southwest of the city of Wei. He wanted to see the inhibition of Dongting open as soon as possible. He wanted to pass the trial of losing his mind. Chapter 228. Junior sister Lu Ling is still in the inhibition. This Taoist's words are obviously emotional. I'm afraid that her spirit has been in the soul-calming bell for too long and her mind will be damaged. Head of the sect, what do the 2 sages think about this? This Taoist in the realm of truth wants to know that since they tried to kill the 9th young master in order to provoke a war, why did they ask Lu Ling to do that? Then why did Lu Ling have to do that? Any other true state Daoist would have been able to complete the mission easily, and the situation around the Wei River wouldn't have turned out like this. These days the city of Wei is full of crying. On that day tens of thousands of people died in the city. After that many people died in the battle with Emperor Yi in the abandoned palace. Almost every family in the city is affected and some relatives disappear from the world. Taoists don't care much about the life and death of 1 or 200 or 200 or 2,000 mortals. However, no one likes to stay in a sad city. Not to mention that Ling Kongzi and Yunzi have been killed. Don't mention it. Kun Wuzi has no intention to criticize the 2 sages. Sages have their own foresight. It's not something you and I can guess. Maybe we can't see through it in 1 or 2 years, 10 or 100 years, but someone will see it later. The world is a chessboard and we don't know who is the chess piece. But you have to do it carefully. The warrior saved the girl of the Qiao family. Do you know the background of the warrior? He is just a warrior in Jianghu. I don't know the details, but it seems that he has something to do with the demon Li Yunxin. We made several plans and thought of several scenarios to let Xiao Jiasen be saved by Li Yunxin. In the end he came in himself. The Taoist says, it's even better. No one can see through him without leaving any traces. Then you go and do it. Kun Wuzi says, if you want to pass the trial of losing mind, go and deceive the inhibition of Dongting. We don't have much time. Xinryu has disappeared. Maybe he is coming to Dongting. You only have one chance. If it doesn't work, we have to use these magic circles. That would be a great disaster and I can't bear to see it happen. Yes. Yu Meng had once sent Li Yunxin and Xiao Jiasen back to the city of Wei. But at that time Li Yunxin was unconscious, or dead. Ying Juren and Xiao Jiasen had some connection, but they had only met a friend's daughter, not a close relationship. Therefore neither of them knew if the current Xiao Jiasen was the same Xiao Jiasen from before. Xiao Jiasen was in a dense forest. She was still a faceless ghost, but her form was no longer as ethereal as when Li Yunxin first met her. Her body had weight. When Ying Juren pulled her, it was like pulling a gust of wind. Although she was said to be faceless, she would occasionally have a silhouette when she was standing still. For example, at this moment, Xiao Jiasen, who was dressed in a misty white robe, stood motionlessly under a few towering trees that needed several people to encircle. She only stared at the gaps between the branches and leaves. When she was walking, her face was like a whiteboard. But after standing for a long time, colors and shadows slowly seeped out from the whiteboard. Little by little, the original silhouette of the girl was outlined. In this way, her face really seemed to be made of incense. As long as she shook it, the smoke would disperse. In fact, it was true. Li Yunxin let Xiao Jiasen and his 5 monsters enjoy the worship of incense. Her body had gradually begun to condense. Her face was also gradually restored. But she was still a child when she died, and her mind was not as firm as that of an adult. Besides, the 4 monsters and the 3 flowers all had the spiritual wisdom of demons, so they progressed much faster than her. At this moment, Xiao Jiasen stood in the dense forest, staring at the branches and leaves in a daze. It took half an hour for the facial features to condense on her face. Wu Su and Lily finally dared to carefully look at this girl who was about the same age as them. He shouldn't have been delayed here. They were indeed on their way. Xiao Jiasen's ghost did not speak, but she was conscious. She even nodded to Ying Juren to show her gratitude after helping him escape danger. Ying Juren, Yu Meng, Wu Su, Lily, and dozens of Jianghu warriors were all surprised by her existence. She was a real ghost. They were not Li Yunxin. Ghosts and demons were in the category of probably existing to ordinary people. People often swore that they saw demons and ghosts, but ordinary people might not be able to see them for their whole lives. But now they saw it with their own eyes. Even after a series of miraculous events in the city of Wei, this feeling of surprise was still very strong. Therefore, when Xiao Jiasen suddenly stopped here, people did not know what to do. They could not pull her. Previously, Ying Juren could pull her along because she was willing to follow. Otherwise, his hand would have passed through her body, and she would have felt a piercing coldness. Along the way, he told her some things, saying that he would bring her to look for Li Yunxin. He also told her about the friendship between Ying Juren and her father. This ghost did not speak, so people took it as an understanding. But they did not expect such an accident to happen at this time. People whispered, afraid that the ghost would be angry and harm people. Ying Juren was not afraid, at least it seemed that he was not. He walked to her and asked her patiently what was going on. No one knew, she just remembered some things. When a spirit leaves the body and becomes a ghost, its consciousness will be damaged. And for someone like her who was possessed immediately after death, the damage would be more serious. As a ghost, she could only remember some things based on instinct. For example, she could not go to the Qiao family's house, or she felt close to Li Yunxin. After that, she endured the power of incense, wishes, and magic power, and her consciousness became clearer. Until today, when she came here, she finally remembered that night. That night she experienced terror and despair. After despair there was surprise, fear, and then she was killed. She did not even have time to fear before she died. That night she was also in the forest, and there were also towering trees like this. It was not until now, 3 months after her death, that she realized her former family members were all gone or dead. Only she was now a lonely ghost living in this world. Xiao Jiasen stood like this for half an hour, and her face finally showed some more vivid expression. After a moment she gently exhaled. This breath was very, very light. But in front of her was a branch of green leaf. The leaf was blown by her breath. The closest to her was Ingjuren. Just as she let out a breath, Black Knife suddenly felt that the ghost's body had undergone some kind of change. But he could not tell what the change was. He just felt that she seemed to be closer. When he looked at Xiao Jiasen before, it was like looking at a fog, a shower, or a gust of wind. He was isolated from the world. Even when standing in front of her she felt very far away. That was a ghost. But looking at her now, she felt that she had returned to this world. Chapter 229. In fact, at this moment, because Xiao Jiasen recalled the events of her past life and received the power of prayers, she finally received Xing Yi and gained spiritual wisdom. She reformed her body and became a ghost cultivator. At this moment a few months ago she was just an innocent young girl. But now she became a ghost cultivator with the state of mind. In terms of supernatural powers, this Xiao Jiasen was the most capable among this group of people. However, no one knew what she was thinking when she formed her body. She just stared at the dense forest. When Ingjuren finally couldn't help but try to touch her, this Xiao Jiasen suddenly spoke. This way. This was the first time people heard her speak, and indeed it was the first time she could speak. After saying this, she didn't wait for anyone and walked straight into the forest. At this time, people were surprised to find that the condensed facial features on her face didn't scatter, but only slightly blurred. People were slightly hesitant about whether to follow her or not. But in the end they realized that no matter what, they couldn't just walk away and leave behind the person they risked their lives to save. Although this Xiao Jiasen's actions were strange, she didn't seem to have any intention of harming people. These people were not timid. Otherwise they wouldn't have left the city, and wouldn't have had the idea to save Xiao Jiasen, whom they weren't familiar with, from the hands of the Daoist. Therefore they followed her. But after walking a dozen steps into the forest they realized they were lost. This was already deep in the forest, and the trees were so tall that they reached the clouds. Although it was morning and the sun was shining brightly, the sunlight was blocked by the lush foliage. It was gloomy and quiet, as if it was dusk. A few dozen people were walking in the forest. Logically speaking, it should have been very lively. In addition, people were looking for Xiao Jiasen, so they would occasionally call out to each other in a low voice to prevent being separated from their companions. Because of this, the forest suddenly became much livelier. However, after walking a dozen steps, people slowly realized that they could still hear their companions' voices, but when they wanted to look for her, they couldn't find her. It was as if she was just behind another tree. But if you go around the tree, there is no one behind it. Previously he could see figures in the forest, but now he couldn't even see them. After a dozen more steps, not even the sound could be heard. The people that Ingjuren brought with him were not good people. They had traveled extensively and almost all of them had taken human lives. They were knowledgeable as well. Thus he realized that he had encountered a ghost wall. Some had experienced it, some had heard of it. However, most of the time they would be able to escape in the end. Hence they were not too anxious. Ingjuren did not panic. He realized something was wrong after he took 6 steps into the forest. He was walking with Yu Meng. But after Yu Meng turned around a tree, he disappeared without a trace. At first he could hear the 2 girls' panicked whispers. But soon the voice could no longer be heard. He knew that he had to calm down first. Then he would find the right direction to take a closer look and walk slowly. There would always be a solution. He followed this path for another quarter of an hour, and at last turned out of the particularly dense forest. The road ahead suddenly opened up. It was a flat grassland. The weeds were not even up to his ankles. There was a shallow stream across the grassland. It was the kind of water commonly seen in the forest, mixed with dead branches and rotten leaves, but it was especially clear. There were no fish in the water, but there were a few loaches hiding in the cracks of the rocks at the bottom of the water. He did not know if they could get food. And at the bend of the shallow stream stood a stone tablet. The stone tablet had been there for many years. It was covered with a thick layer of moss. Ingjuren felt that this sudden scene was a little strange. He subconsciously tightened his grip on the hilt of his saber. The leather rope wrapped around the hilt of the saber was slightly uncomfortable, but it gave him a sense of security. He cautiously took a few more steps forward. He could see the words on the stone tablet clearly. He vaguely saw the words Pearl Country. Ingjuren was not a person who did not understand literature. Hence he felt that the tablet and the name had a hint of evil. A whole piece of sunny grassland suddenly appeared in the dense forest. The grass surface was flat as if someone had maintained it. There was a lonely stone tablet beside the stream, with the words Pearl Country engraved on it. He had never heard of such a place. The area around the city of Wei had been prosperous for thousands of years. The possibility of there being a small country buried in history was too small. He thought for a while and decided to leave slowly. But at this moment he saw a person. To be exact, he saw a group of people. People suddenly came out from the forest behind the stone tablet. About 15 or 16 young girls with long legs and thin waists surrounded an old man with a white beard. The old man had a ruddy complexion. He wore a fortune brocade robe and held a 3-bat auspicious cloud wooden crutch in his hand. As soon as this group of people appeared, the grassland was immediately filled with lively laughter and smiles. And this smile was not for others but for Ingjuren. The old man looked at him with a smile and floated over. The group of young girls behind him looked at him shyly, innocently or curiously. From time to time they lowered their heads and whispered to each other before snickering. He did not know what they were laughing about. The sudden situation caused Ingjuren to be slightly stunned. While he was stunned, the old man had already arrived in front of him. He first bowed to him and said, "I am the land of this place. I did not know that young Master Ing was coming. How has young Master Ing been?" Ingjuren frowned slightly and held the knife tightly. The old man laughed again. "Young Master Ing, you can rest assured. Young Master Ing has already arrived at the Pearl Country. The Queen has asked me to invite young Master Ing to attend a banquet. If you are still worried about your companions, there is no need. They are now in the palace, meeting the Queen of the Pearl Country." Ingjuren took another step back and asked coldly, "Who are you?" The old man did not speak again. He only waved his hand. Behind him, a group of young girls immediately surrounded him and hurriedly tried to pull the black saber away. In an instant their faces were covered with makeup. His eyes were filled with snow-white breasts, tender red lips, and laughter that sounded like silver bells. However, these girls who came out of nowhere were passionate and unrestrained. One of them actually turned behind Ingjuren and pecked his neck lightly with her cherry lips. This peck made the black knife feel that the spring scenery in front of him was boundlessly beautiful, with a different kind of charm. He did not know where his previous vigilance had gone. He loosened his grip and allowed the girls to snatch his black saber away. He was carried by the girls and walked side by side with the old man. They passed the stone tablet that had the words Pearl Country engraved on it. However, once they passed the stone tablet, the world in front of them changed. It was originally a towering forest, but at this moment the towering trees were all gone. A magnificent city appeared in front of them. The roads in the city extended in all directions, and the roads were all paved with exquisite white marble. Looking at the buildings in the city, they were all made with silver tiles and white marble bricks. There were men and women dressed in colorful clothes passing each other on the roads in the city. Their faces were all filled with kind smiles. The black saber Ing Ding looked into the distance and saw a 6-story white jade pavilion standing in the middle of the city's interconnected roads. There seemed to be the sound of bamboo flutes on the building, which could be faintly heard from here. He was shocked by this marvelous scene and thought that it was a scene that could only be seen in the residence of the Celestials. His heart skipped a beat and he looked behind him. But he found that he was no longer on the ground. The city was actually floating in the sky. Countless thick trees supported the white jade city, but there was no cold feeling of being high up in the sky. Instead, there was only a round and harmonious feeling of joy. The old man saw that he was engrossed and waved his hand to dismiss the girls, saying, "The queen is already waiting in the building. "Young Master Ing, please follow me, there's going to be a joyous occasion today." Black Knife was already muddle-headed at this moment. He couldn't figure out what was wrong with this scene. He only felt that his brain was stuffed with a wooden stake. He could only walk straight, but he couldn't think logically. So he smiled and let the old man hold his hand. They walked along the road leading in all directions to the White Jade Building in the city. The two of them soon arrived in front of the White Jade Building. They saw a row of warriors dressed in colorful armor standing in front of the door. They had a dignified air. Another white-robed ceremonial officer ran out from the building. When he saw Ing Juren, he shouted, "Young Master Ing is here, young Master Ing is here." Ing Juren didn't know how he was welcomed into the door and went straight to the second floor. When he entered the door, he saw a queen sitting in the middle of the second floor. The queen sat high on the white jade throne, wearing a gold and silver robe embroidered with the patterns of phoenixes and a jade-green brocade feather cloak. At first glance, her whole body was shining brightly like a fairy. Her hair was simple, there was only a 1,000-petal gold chrysanthemum hairpin, and her hair was tied up. But her face was covered by a silver veil, so people couldn't see her face clearly. There was a table in front of the queen. On the table there were plates filled with all kinds of delicacies. The queen was seated on both sides of the left and right side. Ing Juren took a look. They were all familiar faces. Yu Meng, Wu Su and Lily were all seated. Dozens of his subordinates were also seated. Even though there were so many people sitting on the second floor, it didn't seem crowded. Instead, the servants standing by the wall of the hall kept stretching their necks to look at those people. At first, Ing Juren thought that those servants were hungry, and that they were envious of the food on the table in front of them. But when he took a closer look, he realized that they weren't looking at the food in front of those people. They were only looking at those people. But this thought flashed across his mind like a fleeting light and soon disappeared. He saw that the queen waved at him and said, "Show young Master Ing a seat." Ing Juren didn't know how the queen knew his name. But looking at Yu Meng, Wu Su, Lily and the rest, they all had happy and intoxicated expressions on their faces, as if they were in a dream of love. Relieved, he went up to the queen and sat down. The banquet started. First there were dancers, then the concubines served hot wine and dishes. After 3 rounds of wine, the dancers left. Only then did the queen put down her chopsticks and sighed faintly. This sigh actually entered Ing Juren's heart, making him feel both love and pity, and only wanted to share her worries. He cupped his hands, stood up and asked, "Your Majesty, why did you sigh?" The queen didn't answer him. On the other hand, the old man who claimed to be the lord of the land first asked Ing Juren to take a seat. Then he stood up and cupped his hands towards everyone present, saying, "I have invited all of you to my pearl country for a difficult matter. My pearl country has tens of thousands of citizens, living and working in peace and contentment. They have been recuperating in this Huiyuan city for hundreds of years, and although there are occasional conflicts with Tonglin city, they have never been at a disadvantage. But a few years ago, another country came to this area called Tufeng country. Originally we were at peace with that Tufeng country. Who knew that a huge disaster would happen?" The old man's gaze swept past everyone, cleared his throat and continued, "The people of Tufeng country are lazy by nature, but they are also cruel and terrifying. Every spring and summer they have to give birth. When they give birth they will come to our pearl country. They only choose the strong and beautiful men and women to abduct and knock them unconscious. Then they will cut open their bodies and bury the baby that the Tufeng country woman gave birth to after 10 months of pregnancy. The baby will start eating from inside our people's bodies. Until the person becomes an empty shell, then it breaks out of the body. It's a horrible sight. My emperor has sent troops to attack them many times. But the Tufeng country can fly, so we couldn't hurt them at all and could only destroy their nest. But after a few days they rebuilt it again. After a few times, the people in the country have no way to live and there are many complaints. It's not easy to attack them. In the end, we signed an alliance with the Tufeng country's queen. She said that every spring and summer, our pearl country will choose dozens of healthy people to send to them, and they will not invade our country. Now is the time to send people over. But my emperor loves his people like his own children, so how could he bear to send people over? That's why he sighed." Ing Juren was furious when he heard this. He slammed the table and said, "How can there be such a heinous thing? Did His Majesty invite us here to help you attack the Tufeng nation? Your Majesty, don't worry, we martial artists value morality the most. Since we have encountered this, we will not shirk our duty. When the old man heard his words, he chuckled. He bent over and got closer to Ing Juren, his eyebrows curved into crescents, and said, "Young Master Ing is righteous. But I didn't invite you here to attack the Tu Feng country. The Tu Feng country is high up in the sky, there's nothing we can do. Instead, since my emperor can't bear to let the people of our Pearl country go, then we can ask you to go on behalf of our people. That's the best of both worlds." When Ing Juren heard this, he was stunned at first, and a bad premonition welled up in his heart. He then looked at Yu Meng, Wusu and Lily. Previously he sat down and only stared at the queen, not talking to anyone else. Now that he thought about the people who came with him, he finally realized that the smiles on their faces hadn't changed since he entered the hall, and the dishes in front of them hadn't been touched. There was a thought in Black Knife's muddled mind, but he couldn't break free. He heard the queen say, "Since young Master Ing has no objections, then this matter is decided. The people of our Pearl country will not forget young Master Ying's kindness." Guards, however, before the queen could finish her words, a guard in colorful clothes suddenly ran in from outside the door. He kept shouting, Your Majesty, bad news." Chapter 230. Everyone was shocked by the guard's shout. However, the old man who claimed to be the lord of the land frowned and pointed at the guard with 2 fingers, shouting, "Your Majesty is here, what are you panicking for? Tell me in detail what happened." The guard seemed to be more afraid of him than the queen. He trembled and hurriedly knelt down and kowtowed, stuttering, "Reporting, Your Majesty. A few days ago the silver-armored general was ordered by the king to expand the territory, but he accidentally ran into a fog. The general led his men and walked in the fog for 3 to 4 days. Unexpectedly he met 2 malefactors. They killed the general in an instant and followed the trail of the remaining soldiers all the way to the outskirts of the city. Now they are cursing outside the city." He stuttered as he said this. He did not look at His Majesty or the old man, but instead looked at Ing Juren and the other people on the throne. Hearing this, the queen and the old man looked at each other and their expressions changed. As he sent the messenger away, he called for the attendants to take the guests away, leaving only Ing Juren alone. Ing Juren felt a thought in his mind getting stronger and stronger. But when he was about to think about it again, he saw the gorgeous queen walking down from her throne. She leisurely walked in front of him and held his hand. Although Ing Juren was a child of the pugilistic world, he had tasted the taste of the mortal world. But he had never been close to such a noble and beautiful woman. For a moment he was a little dazed and threw the thought to the back of his mind. The queen lifted her hand and took off her veil. Her face became clearer. She had bright eyes and white teeth, cherry lips and snow-white skin. She was really a beautiful woman. But her eyes were watery and her eyebrows were slightly knitted. She looked at him and said sorrowfully, "I want young Master Ing to know that my Yuanzhu country is facing a great calamity. I fell in love with young Master Ing the first time I saw you. I only wanted you to be the queen's son-in-law, the king of a country. But now 2 malefactors came and ruined my happy occasion. If young Master Ing also has feelings for me, can you lend me a hand when I'm in trouble in the future?" Ing Juren was dazzled by her aura of treasure, and his mind could no longer process it. He said, Aren't you going to give us to the Tu Feng people?" The queen moved closer to him and held his hand. Her breath smelled like orchids. "How can we be given to a great husband like you?" Ing Juren was confused by her shameless words, and for a moment he couldn't even speak. He could only mumble and didn't know what he had agreed to. When he woke up, he found that he was already outside the city. Behind him was the Pearl Kingdom, and in front of him was a ravine and uneven ground. Looking left and right, he saw thousands of soldiers in colorful clothes. The Queen of the Pearl Kingdom had also changed into her military attire and was sitting on a throne carried by 16 people. She was waving the short sword in her hand and giving instructions to the soldiers. He was among the Queen's personal guards, and beside him was the old man who called himself the Land God. The old man squinted his eyes and looked into the distance for a while. The Yuanzhu country is suffering from the invasion of the Tu Feng people, but they don't think about how to expel them. Instead they accept their fate. Now that they are attacked they want to fight back. Unfortunately they are in a mess. It is hard to tell who is friend and foe, so they set up a target for themselves. It is really funny and pitiful. After leaving the White Jade Tower and getting further away from the queen, Ingjuren felt that his mind was becoming clearer. At this moment when he suddenly heard this old man say these brainless words he couldn't understand for a moment. He just frowned. Aren't you working for the queen? Why are you saying these things now? The old man did not say anything. He just shook his head, smiled and did not answer. Ingjuren wanted to ask again, but he found that the sky in front of him had darkened. He quickly looked up and found that his vision was blocked by two huge things. Both of them were as big as a small mountain, as tall as dozens of Yuanzhou country people stacked together. One of them had a pair of fiery red eyes, wore a white robe and had a pair of white wings on his head. The other one was wearing gray armor. There was nothing special about its eyes, but it was dragging 100 pieces of iron whip behind it. The two of them were like mountains pressing down on him, looking down at the bead formation from above. Even if Ingjuren was muddle-headed right now, even if he was used to seeing life and death and had traveled extensively, when he really saw such a horrifying scene he still felt his legs go weak and his mouth turn bitter. But he still had the spirit of a martial artist. He gritted his teeth and thought about where he should go if the Yuanzhou country could not win. While he was thinking, the queen of the Yuanzhou country had already raised her sword and shouted, "Where are you two from? Why are you attacking the Yuanzhou country?" The monster in white robe spoke. His voice was like thunder, but it was also a bit sharp. Sounded very strange. "You ignorant fool, how dare you offend us? Do you know that this place has been our training ground since 100 years ago?" The monster in white robe said this and no longer hesitated. He leapt forward and with a stomp he killed dozens of people. The queen did not say anything else. After a series of shouts, the Yuanzhou country soldiers threw out ropes from their hands, trying to catch the monster and subdue him. The ropes in the soldiers' hands were made of an unknown material. It looked thin, but it was shockingly tough. The monster in white robe rushed into the army. At first he dashed left and right, killing countless people. But soon he was caught by the ropes. After breaking free from 5 or 6 ropes, another 15 or 16 more came. As a result, it became more and more difficult for him to move. In the end, his entire body was covered with ropes and soldiers. Looking at him now, it was as if he had another white robe on top of his own. He was pressed to the ground and it was difficult for him to move. Cheers could be heard from the Yuanzhou country's army. The soldiers climbed up the ropes and stabbed him with weapons that were unknown as to whether they were swords or sabers. Just as they were about to breathe a sigh of relief, the other monster arrived. The two monsters seemed to have done this on purpose. First, they called the monster in white robe to test the situation. When he was trapped, the monster in gray armor appeared. As soon as he came out, he swung the iron whip that was broken into hundreds of pieces behind him. The monster could swallow hundreds of people with a single bite. Although the iron whip looked thin, it was still as tall as a person. With such a powerful swing, a large number of soldiers were sent flying. The rope on the monster in white robe loosened a little. The monster took the opportunity to shout and stood up, escaping. The two monsters gathered together and showed off their might. They only managed to destroy the Yuanzhou country's army, causing countless casualties. The queen of Yuanzhou country saw that the situation was bad and immediately ordered a retreat. However, those armored soldiers were already scared out of their wits. They retreated in a disorderly manner, and the two monsters seized the opportunity to kill them to their heart's content. Ingjuren was dragged into the crowd and followed them. Just like that, he chased and fled into the city. The two monsters did not give up and chased after him. The people in the city were restless. They went to the streets to protect their homes. There were many people, but they did not have any weapons. They could only fight with their bodies. But in this way, it really slowed down the momentum of the two monsters, allowing the queen and Ingjuren to escape into the White Jade Tower. The queen did not say anything. She pulled Ingjuren into the tower and asked her servants to leave. She said sadly, "Young Master Ing, we probably can't avoid this disaster. I hope young Master Ing remembers what you promised me. If we fall into the hands of the monsters, I hope young Master Ing can protect us." Ingjuren was still puzzled. Why did she have to beg him? Suddenly he felt the earth shaking. The two monsters had finally reached the center of the city and pushed down the White Jade Tower. Logically, when a building collapsed, there should be debris flying everywhere. The people in the building would also be killed. But what Ingjuren saw was not such a tragic scene. It was strange. It was as if the sky of this world had been crumpled by an invisible hand at the moment the building collapsed. The scattered debris became distorted in an instant. It was as if everything he saw before, the soldiers, the city, the clothes, the cups, and even the queen, was a painting on a huge curtain. Now that the big hand had pulled away the curtain, they had all lost their normal appearance. Those scenes were taken away and became distorted. A layer of veil in Ingjuren's mind was also taken away. His memories and clear reasoning suddenly returned to his mind. Ingjuren's eyes suddenly widened as he realized he had returned to the real world. The first thing he saw when he opened his eyes was the sky. He had a habit of seeing the sun in the wilderness. When he saw this patch of grass, he subconsciously looked up at the sky. At that time, the sun was still in the east. It was morning. Looking at the sky now, the sun was still in the east. Even the cloud that looked like an ingot that he had seen before was only elongated into a small boat. Not much time had passed. The sunlight was dazzling. He immediately got up. He felt for his black knife. Using his hand to support himself, he sat up. His body felt sore and weak. When his eyes adjusted to the dim light in the forest, he saw a large group of people lying on the ground. Yimeng was among them. Wu Su and Lili were also among them. His subordinates were all among them. There were two more people. One was dressed in gray. He had shifty-eyed eyes and looked like a street thug. The other was a young man in a white robe. The young man didn't look bad. He had delicate features. But when he spoke, he showed two big front teeth. He was talking to Ingjuren. He said with a smile, "You people are lucky. If you came any later, you would have turned into pus." Ingjuren saw that the two looked familiar. But he couldn't remember where he had seen them. He just frowned and held his knife. "Who are you? What happened just now?" The young man laughed. His face even blushed when he laughed. "I am the White Dragon Envoy, Daoist 2CG, a disciple of Wei River Dragon King Li Yunxin." Then he stepped back slightly. "This is the Green Dragon Envoy, Daoist 2CG, a disciple of Wei River Dragon King Li Yunxin. He is my senior. We have met before. Do you remember those two Taoist priests? In the alley of Wei City? You have an old man with you." Although Ingjuren had regained consciousness, his mind was still a little numb. Hearing the young man's words, he thought for a while but couldn't figure it out. The young man just smiled and stared at him. But the shifty-eyed man stepped forward. "Little brother, don't tease him." Then he said to Ingjuren, "Look at what happened just now." He stepped aside after saying that. Ingjuren then saw what was behind them. There was a big stone behind them. The stone was as tall as a person and looked familiar. Ingjuren quickly realized that the outline of the stone was exactly the same as the stone tablet with Pearl Country written on it. But there were no words carved on the stone. Instead, it became hollow because of the wind and the sun over the years. There was a tree growing in the hollow stone. The tree was curled up by the stone and the trunk was twisted. And on a thick horizontal trunk of the tree, Ingjuren saw a big spider web. The snow-white spider web was originally very dense and extended in all directions. It looked like the white jade city of Pearl Country that he had seen before. But now the spider web was broken in half and seemed to have been torn by someone. On the spider web, the densely packed, colorful little spiders were fleeing in all directions in panic. In the middle of the spider web was an egg sac wrapped in layers of spider silk. Inside it was a big spider the size of half a palm. This spider was particularly colorful, and at this time it seemed to have suffered some kind of injury, lying on the egg and shivering, but from time to time it pointed its two front pincers in the direction of Ingjuren, as if it wanted to say something to him. Ingjuren immediately took 2 steps back, thinking of the white streets, the queen in colorful clothes and the armored soldiers in colorful clothes. He almost vomited a mouthful of disgust and annoyance in his heart. The rat spirit Shuk smiled and said, "This colorful spider is poisonous. It has become a spirit and its toxicity is even stronger. You were all bitten on the neck by the colorful spider earlier and your bodies can no longer move. Your minds have been taken away by the female goblin. Look on the internet again. Look over there." Ingjuren turned his head to look in the direction he pointed. There was a tree on the edge of the grass. There were mosquitoes buzzing on the tree, but he couldn't see what they were. The rat spirit said, That's a black-winged earth bee. It doesn't make its own nest, doesn't collect honey, but lives as a parasite. In the spring and summer, it looks for the fat earth bees, stings them to death and lays eggs in their bodies. When the larvae hatch, it first eats from the body of the colorful spider. When it's empty, it flies out. Come to think of it, everything has its vanquisher. These colorful spiders knocked you out, probably to give you to the earth bees to lay eggs. Shuck pointed to the big spider in the middle of the spider web. But it's strange. The others were almost poisoned to death, but you showed mercy. What did this female goblin say to you? By this time, Ingjuren already knew that the man in gray and the man in white were not ordinary people. After a while, he also remembered the scene of that night when he met the 5 demons in the alley. He was a little relieved he was going to find Li Yunxin, but he met his 2 envoys here, so he was probably nearby. Although that Li Yunxin's speech and behavior were full of frightening evil, he didn't seem to be malicious to him, but rather valued him. Ingjuren didn't know why such a figure valued Immortal, but he knew that at least for now there shouldn't be any danger. He remembered what the queen said to him twice. She wanted him to take care of her after the city was breached. Thinking of this, he felt a pain in his chest and couldn't help but look away from the big spider that was bowing to him. Instead, he looked around again and said to Shuck, "There's also an old man." Then he described the old man's appearance in detail and asked, "What is that thing?" "He claims to be the land here." Shuck and Sky looked at each other and then looked at Ingjuren. "I've never seen him before. We lived here before we met Mrs. Sanhua in the city of Wei. We knew about the colorful spiders and so did the earth bees. But we didn't know there was any land here. Did you get poisoned and misremember?" Ingjuren was stunned and didn't say anything. But he felt that he didn't remember wrongly. Everything just now could be matched. Only the old man was missing. He still remembered what the old man said to him in the battle formation. It sounded inexplicable, but it was very memorable. Seeing that he didn't speak, Daoist Shuck just thought that he really remembered wrong. He pointed to the big colorful spider. "In the past we didn't care about this. But today she kidnapped our junior sister Jessin, so we can't let her go easily. Junior sister Jessin said that you saved her. Now that we know." At this point he saw that Ingjuren suddenly became angry. He waved the black knife in his hand and slashed, smashing the big stone in the middle. He shouted, "Bah! What a demon!" Gravel flew everywhere, the tree was also cut in 2, the spider web was completely torn, and the big spider was nowhere to be seen. It was unknown whether it was killed or escaped. The rat demon couldn't stop it and smiled bitterly. "You can't kill her like this. It's not an ordinary thing. Well, let it escape anyway. Jessin is fine. You call all these people. I'll take you to see the leader elder Mrs. Sanhua." You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.